Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Drill. I'm Michael Rochman. That's Bailey Kumar, and the 2026 NFL Draft is now over. All that's left to do is to completely hate on it. We're here to give our draft grades. We're here for you guys to comment and just tell us how wrong we are if we aren't giving A pluses to your team. Some of them, though, we might be giving A pluses to. You'll have to stick around and find out. We're covering all 32 teams here today. But before we dive into any of it, Bailey, an exciting draft weekend. How'd you enjoy it?
I mean, it was great. A lot of unexpected picks, a lot of unexpected falls, a lot of unexpected reaches. Some of those teams in the second round were going a bit crazy. It was certainly edge of your seat. Never knew what was happening next.
It's certainly just one that we can't wait to dive into. So, without further ado, we might as well. As you can see on screen, we have the Arizona Cardinals. So, we're going to start. We'll go in alphabetical order. And they started things off with the third pick where they got Jeremiah Love. Bailey, this is an exciting playmaking running back. What did you think of the selection? Obviously, there's this big debate about positional value, especially early in the draft. What do you think of a guy like Love, and is it worth it for the Cardinals to make that type of investment?
See, I'm not sure from the Cardinals' perspective how worth it this pick was. He's obviously like a great player. Like there's no debating how good of a running back he is. It's just if it's worth it at that third overall spot, like you said, like the contract and the guaranteed money that he's getting is like top of the league, and I'm just not sure if it's worth it for the Cardinals right now. Like they have like really, really good dynamic playmakers now with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, but I'm what Love has to be worth this contract in this draft slot is not something that I think he can realistically achieve.
Yeah, I think I understand the debate about like, oh, you're overpaying for a rookie running back when you're drafting him this early because he becomes like a top 10 paid running back in the league. But also at the same time, I think the draft like salaries are just so evened out like throughout the rest of your picks that you're going to be making that it comes out in the wash ultimately. So I think it's not worth it enough to really kind of assess like, oh, is this going to be a good return on value versus just trying to make sure that you're landing good players. And obviously, there's other more impactful positions that they probably could have gone and hit on. But if they felt most confident and most impact was going to come from Jeremiah Love, then I 100% support the decision. So moving forward to day two, they get Chase Basantes, guard out of Texas A&M, and Carson Beck, quarterback out of Miami, Florida. A little bit of a surprise, but we did hear even as high as first round rumblings for the Miami Hurricane. Bailey, this is an exciting day two haul. I mean, whether or not you're into Basantes or Beck, this is still one that's going to be very interesting and worth keeping an eye on all season. What do you think of the impact for this day two class for the Cardinals?
Yeah, the Cardinals come out all offense when the first three pick, and Basantes slides in nicely to that right guard spot that they have open. And the Cardinals have like a pretty good O line now, besides the right tackle Elijah Wilkinson, who's a bit iffy, and he's a good fit for that Michael Fleur scheme. And this is not typically a guard that the Cardinals have gone after. And typically, they like the more like zone power guys, not zone, sorry, gap power guys. So might be a sign they're moving more to a zone scheme as that's kind of DeSantis' specialty. And Carson Beck, we kind of thought this might be a Ty Simpson team, Michael, but Carson Beck is experienced. He's pro ready. He's smart. He can pretty much execute any throw you ask of him. I wouldn't be surprised if Beck wins the starting job over Jacoby Brissett, or at least starts like multiple games this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to want to know what they have in their quarterback room before the end of the season, assuming this team isn't, like a dark horse playoff team. I think Basantes is going to slot in at left guard and Sumalo is probably going to go right guard, but I'm not 100% certain or really care that much. I mean, one of them is going to be at one spot, one will be at the other. But overall, I think it's an intriguing day two haul where you're kind of saying, look, if we can land starters, that's great. If we end up having to, look at Beck as a long term backup, that's still not bad value in round three. Moving forward to day three, they started off with Caleb Proctor, defensive lineman out of Southeast Louisiana. With the fifth round, they got Reggie Virgil, wide receiver out of Texas Tech. And in the sixth round, they got Carson Schrar, linebacker out of Iowa. And then with the seventh round pick, they got Jaden Williams, offensive tackle out of Ole Miss. Bailey, just four picks on day three. Some of these other teams felt like they had like 20. What's one pick from this day three batch that you want to talk about most?
I like Reggie Virgil, the wide receiver out of Texas. He's not like a traditional going to be like, oh, this guy's going to be amazing, but he has the size and agility that's kind of rare for a wide receiver. Kind of a unique skill set that you don't see every day. So he definitely is going to have a role in this wide receiver core, probably in the backup role and reserve role. So I don't expect a lot out of him, but I think he's going to make the roster. He's going to sneaky guy to sneak up the depth chart.
Yeah, I want to talk about Caleb Proctor in the fourth round, an exciting pass rushing defensive lineman who even showed some flash when he went against tougher competition early in the year in the out of conference schedule. He's a guy that absolutely needs development in run defense. He just gets like completely taken out of the play sometimes. But I think the overall upside, this is going to be a situation similar to Milton Williams, where he just needs that time and development and patience. But if he gets there to where he can contribute in the running game, the pass rushing impact that he has is going to make him one of the more intriguing interior defenders in the NFL. Moving forward to the Atlanta Falcons
Hold
now,
on,
and
Michael.
this,
Do you not have a draft grade for the Cardinals?
oh yeah, fair enough. I forgot about the main premise of this video. Yeah, so I think for me, when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to give them a B plus. I like the Jeremiah Love pick. I'm just not totally sold on some of the other selections that they made. Basantes, I'm a little lower on compared to some of the other guards that were on the board. Carson Beck, I'm a little lower on when it comes to his long term projection. I do like the Caleb Proctor pick, and I think Love's going to be a stud. The rest, I think, is going to kind of come out in the wash for me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm a little bit lower. I'm on a B. I don't. I'm not like in love with the Cardinals did here. Like they took the players where they're going to go. Like they took Love, that's third overall. He probably went fourth overall or maybe fifth overall if they didn't take him with Santos. He had round one talk, and you slip to the second. You take him there, and Carson Beck like a third round QB pretty much every draft. But yeah, I'm just not sold on this. I'm not sold on their approach. But this is a transition year for the Cardinals as they come have a new head coach and they're trying to shift over to a new scheme. So I do like these players. I think they got a lot of productive players, but it's good. It's just not great.
Now we move forward to the Atlanta Falcons, a team that we're skipping day one talk on because they didn't have the first round pick. But we do have some intriguing day two selections with Avion Terrell out of Clemson and Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. Two guys that had some first round talk heading into this kind of late stage draft cycle. Bailey, these are two guys that I think people are going to be very intrigued with as they enter Atlanta with opportunities to see the field. What do you think the role is going to be for them in their rookie season, and what kind of projection do you see for them going forward?
Yeah, the Avion Terrell pick really threw me off guard. I thought the Falcons were going to go maybe defensive line, edge, wide receiver, but they go corner. And I'm not sure that's their biggest need. They have like three solid corners. They have, Terrell's brother, AJ Terrell. They have Mike Hughes, and they have Billy Bowman as their slot guy. And I believe Bowman got injured, so maybe they're not 100% sold on him. They'll try Terrell in the slot, but I don't see this as a huge need for the Falcons here. So a bit of a luxury pick. So I'm not completely sold on that. And Zachariah Branch is definitely a need. They definitely need a wide receiver, but I would like to see a wide receiver who's a bit more of a wide receiver. Branch, a bit of a manufactured touch guy at Georgia. He's great on the screens and he's great at the ball in his hands, but I'm not sure about his route running, his downfield ability. And I thought the Falcons needed a more complete wide receiver in this class.
Yeah, I think the Falcons' offense is very exciting, and a lot of the kind of question marks come down to QB play and just the consistency from snap to snap. But I think what really would have really helped Penix or whoever's under center is getting a second wideout that can kind of add to the downfield presence. London is such a good downfield threat. Pitts is sort of similar. So you're kind of looking for some other guy that can win in that short to underneath and then that medium game. Branch is good enough in the short to underneath game, but I kind of question his downfield ability to win in that 10 to 15 yards, be that kind of chains mover type receiver. So I didn't love it, but I think in the third round it's still good value. I didn't love his usage at Georgia, to where I think there is maybe more on his skill set and more that can be added to his plate in the NFL to where he can evolve what he is as a wideout. But overall, yeah, I kind of agree with you on Terrell. I didn't think cornerback was a pressing need. I think it was kind of a situation of we have a high enough grade on this guy. There is probably a little bit of bias with his brother being a star for the team to where they were like, let's just do it. And I don't know if the Falcons are in that type of position to where they can afford picks like this, where they say, we have a high enough grade. And, it's pretty cool to get his brother already on the roster in the same team. So, yeah, I didn't love it. Moving forward to the day three picks that they had Kendall Daniels, the linebacker utility player out of Oklahoma. They had Ontario Thompson, defensive lineman out of Washington. Harold Perkins Jr., linebacker from LSU. And Ethan Onyanwa, offensive lineman from Ohio State. Bailey, do you have a day three pick that stands out to you?
Yeah, I like Kendall Daniels. He's an athletic linebacker. I like that, and I like the linebackers who can help out on special teams, which he can. He should be like the linebacker for there, and he's going to help out. He has he's good downhill, his good instinct, which should help him on the special teams as well. And I can definitely see him being a year one contributor.
Yeah, the guy that I want to talk about is Harold Perkins, a guy that really started out his SEC career seeming like one of the best pass rushers in college football. Obviously, that kind of changes as he heads to the NFL. And after his freshman season, even, he was more of a linebacker. But this is a guy that's just always kind of stuffed the stat sheet. This is a Falcons team that their front seven is really kind of a huge question mark right now with James Pierce's future in doubt. They have guys that can kind of step in as like these rotational edge rushers, maybe Perkins is a guy that you can kind of utilize all over the front seven. Maybe use him to kind of make up for the lack of edge rushing presence with inevitably like at least a Pierce suspension, I would say, to where you can kind of find ways to replace him in the aggregate. But ultimately, I think Perkins is a guy that's just been undeniably impactful to where I trust that he can continue to find ways to do so for Atlanta. So, Bailey, we're looking at the overall assessment of this class. What's your draft grade for the Falcons?
I have a C plus on this Falcons class. Obviously they traded their first for James Pierce, and they don't have as many premium picks. When we don't have as many premium picks, you can't really be doing stuff like taking Avion Trell. You really need to hit your needs harder. Take a backup corner, a wide receiver who's still pretty raw. I don't think really helps them that much now. I mean, I do like these players. I think they're good players, but I just don't like this from a needs perspective.
Yeah, I don't want to bash a team too badly for going in a like BPA approach because I do think that some teams I'll probably be bashing for maybe forcing their needs too much. But I didn't love the selection when there were some other options on the board that I felt maybe would have served their team better. I'm big on best impact available more so than best player available, and I don't know if Terrell is going to make the best impact. So I'm probably right there with you with a C plus for the Falcons. Moving forward now to our next team, and it's the Baltimore Ravens, a team that was very busy on draft day, especially day three. They started things out with Olai Vavenga Ioane, offensive guard out of Penn State. Then in the second round, they got Zion Young, edge rusher out of Missouri. In the third round, they got Jacoby Lane, wide receiver out of USC. And then they got very busy on day three, where in the fourth round, they got Elijah Surratt, wide receiver out of Indiana, and tight end Matthew Hibner from SMU. In the fifth round, they got Chandler Rivers, cornerback from Duke, Josh Cuevas, tight end from Alabama, and Adam Randall, running back from Clemson. In the sixth round, they got Ryan Eckley, punter from Michigan State, Namdi Obiizer, linebacker from TCU. That's wrong. Apologies on that one. They got I just should have eliminated those two. Apologies. They didn't grab either of those guys. Rayshon Benny, defensive lineman out of Michigan, and then Evan Bjornsson, offensive lineman from Northwestern. Bailey eliminating Obiizer and Toriano Pride. This is still quite the draft haul for the Baltimore Ravens. Let's start with the first round pick where Olai Venga Ioane felt like a guy that was being projected to the Ravens almost from the second the season ended. And now on draft day, it comes to fruition. What do you think the impact is here for Ioane on this Ravens offensive line?
I mean, this is such an obvious pick. I don't even want to spend too much time analyzing it. He's like the top guard in this class. Well, I shouldn't actually say that when we get to the the Giants draft, but the top like pure guard in this draft, and he's just such a need there at that right guard position. They've had so much trouble filling that over the past couple of years. Instant Pro Bowl starter. There's not much to really add to how good this pick was. Just perfectly fills a need, and they didn't reach on the board. Just overall great.
So moving forward to that day two haul, like we said, Young and Lane. What are your thoughts on these selections, especially for two positions of need for the Ravens?
Yeah, I thought the Zion Young pick was a bit interesting. The Ravens edge room right now, or before this draft, was Trey Hendrickson and Mike Green. Two guys who are good at passing or rushing the passer, but not great at run defense. And that's kind of, Zion Young's specialty. He's more of a run defender than pass rusher right now, but he should be like a good edge three for them, rotate him in when they need to get a stop on the run in these short yard situations. And he can grow into a pass rusher. I really like that pick from them. And Jacoby Lane, it's clear that the Ravens really wanted a possession receiver, especially with who they took in the third with Elijah Surratt. They're kind of identify that as a weakness on their team. And, both those guys are kind of chain mover possession guys who should add a nice, extra dimension to the Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, I like both receivers they added. I want to talk a little bit about Zion Young just because Jesse Minter kind of had a defense where they weren't necessarily great athletes coming off of the edge, but they were so technically refined and they were able to win with their play strength and power. And I think that's where Zion Young really stood out to a guy like Minter who probably identified him pretty early in the process. Getting that power rushing, getting that ability to set the edge to where guys like Trey Hendrickson and Mike Green can really kind of just operate as finesse pass rushers. I think it sets up this defense well, and I trust Minter to really make the most of it. Moving forward to day three, though, the guy I want to talk about is Matthew Hibner, a tight end that I think a lot of people were kind of overlooking in the draft process, but he's someone that I had not even super high just because it was such a mixed receiving or tight end class of just different options. But I still really liked him because he's a guy that I think serves a lot of purposes. He's a solid blocker, a dependable receiver, nice athlete. And while maybe he's not the most exciting player, he's not going to become like a superstar for the Ravens. I do think that he's going to serve his role quite well as that tight end two playing opposite Mark Andrews, where you can let Andrews kind of work downfield as a pass catcher and let Hibner stay in line, but still be able to contribute in the receiving game and find ways to develop as a pass catcher to where he's a serviceable, dependable, and starting weapon in the NFL. Bailey, who do you like from this day three haul?
I like Chandler Rivers. He's an outside corner at Duke, but he's probably going to move inside due to his size. But he has the tenacity, he has the athleticism, he has the attitude, he has the ball skills, the IQ to really, develop into a starter. Maybe he starts out in a backup role, but as soon as the Ravens have a need at nickel or slot corner, he's going to be first up in line, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting down the line.
It's an exciting day three haul. Bailey, this is a very typical Ravens draft, I feel like. So what's your grade here on this overall haul?
I give them an A minus. I mean, not all these picks are accurate, but they did not address center or safety in this draft, which I thought was really weird considering all the picks they had. Those are two, pretty major needs I thought they had. After Linderbaum left, I'm not sure who's their projected starting center right now, but I would like to see a competition there. And in the safety, would like to see a depth right now. Their depth is kind of thin after their starting guys there. So, you know, I do like the players, but I would have liked to see a little more competition.
It'll be interesting to see who ends up starting a center. It may be Bjornston, but I know that they have Corey Bullock there as the projected starter right now. Ultimately, it's an exciting class. For me, I'd probably give it an A minus, maybe B plus. I really like Surratt. I want to see what happens there in that wide receiver room. I think he's going to outproduce Lane. But I feel like a lot of guys that they got in this class could easily contribute. And if you're pulling, 4 to 5 notable contributors in a draft class, can't really ask for much more. Moving forward to the next draft class, and that is the Buffalo Bills, a team that, traded out of the first round, still got active a little bit. So we're going to go through their selections. In the second round, they added TJ Parker, edge rush out of Clemson, and Davison Igbinosun, cornerback out of Ohio State. Bailey, that was all for them on day two. So we'll talk about that first before we dive into the day three selections. These are two fun players that maybe had some work to do after 2024 and had some development, but also, Parker kind of fell down the draft board. Do you think these guys are going to be instant contributors to the Bills, or do you think they're more developmental pieces?
I think they're more developmental pieces, but did they really take Igbenusson in the second?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I thought they
It
took
was,
him in
it
the
was
third.
late second.
Still, oh my! I mean, that kind of changes my opinion. I thought they got this guy in the third. I mean, Parker's like, he's like a well-rounded edge. He's pretty good. Like, I think they have their starting guys right now. But I do think Parker is going to mix in a good amount as that in that edge 3 role, and he's solid and he's dependable. He's got the power. He's got the run defense, like you said, top 5 pick. He's I like him. He's a good pick, and then Igbenus and just like he's going to be like the cornerback 4. I think the Bills were really kind of feeling it with their corner depth last year, and he should be able to provide that in that role. And someone gets injured, he will start, and he's capable of doing it. But yeah, I mean, kind of a boring start to this draft for the Bills.
Yeah, I don't think it's super flashy, but I do think there is like value in some of the acquisitions that they made. Parker's kind of well rounded. I think he's got some light feet, plays well with just in terms of going into blocks. I think he generates enough power, and he's a solid run defender. I just didn't think there was really enough flash to where I feel like he's going to impact the room a ton. But the D line's good enough to where a guy like Parker can really kind of benefit from that and create some production as a result. Igbenogson, someone that I actually was pretty intrigued with. I think he's a nice, bigger mover that is probably going to be operating as like a press bail guy. And I think Buffalo is looking to try to lean more in that direction. Igbenogson cleaned up his game a lot. In 2024, I think he had like 15 pass interference penalties, and this year is only 7. So, there's steps in the right direction. That's still a lot of penalties, so he needs to clean it up even further. But, good step in the right direction. Overall, though, I do think Buffalo kind of needed a more impactful early pick, and they didn't necessarily get it for me when it comes to these selections and my evaluation of them. Still moving forward, though, to day 3, they started things off by adding Jude Bowery, offensive tackle out of Boston College. Then they continued in the 4th round with Skylar Bell, wide receiver from UConn, and Caleb Elarms-Orr from TCU, the linebacker. In round 5, they added Jalen Kilgore, safety out of South Carolina. And they also added Zane Durant, defensive lineman from Penn State. And in the 7th round, they added Toriano Pride Jr., cornerback from Missouri, Tommy Doman, punter from Florida, and Armaj Reed Adams, offensive guard from Texas A&M. Bailey, 8 different selections. Pick one that you think stands out to you the most.
I mean, there's so many, and the Bills did a good job. They traded down a lot in the first round. Obviously, out of the second, they picked up a ton of extra picks. But if I were to kind of pick one out, it'd probably be Jalen Kilgore. He's going to be like probably a backup slot defender, but he also played both safety spots. I think kind of has that versatility. And if they're in a situation where they really need a tight end eraser, I think Kilgore can step into the role pretty well as he kind of smooths out his game. He's all a little bit rough around the edges, but I think he's going to be an underrated, like kind of sneaky producer for them down the line.
Yeah, a guy that I like is Caleb Elam-Zor, a really exciting high motor player that I think has really nice coverage instincts. He over pursues at times, so the play discipline will need to develop. But this is a team that probably the biggest need on their roster was linebackers. So getting some young talent at the position is going to be important. For a guy like Elam-Zor, there's a wide open opportunity for him to be a day one contributor for this defense. And I don't think it's out of the realm possibility that he capitalizes on it. So moving forward now to our draft grades, Bailey, what do you give this Buffalo Bills haul?
This is such a typical Bills draft. And I remember last year when I was talking about their grades, I'm like, we're gonna be here again talking about how the Bills, build around. And they did that in the first 2 days, with Parker and Igbenogson. But like day three, I thought they was really solid for them. It was one of their best day threes that I can remember. A lot of intriguing players here, good solid floors, some intriguing upside, and just a really well-rounded draft where they filled up a lot of their needs and got a lot of solid depth. So, I'm giving this one a B plus. This is like the best version of the Bills draft for one of the more stubborn teams in the league in terms of their draft philosophy and addressing needs.
Yeah, I think they definitely got some guys that I like on day three to where I'm like tempted to give them more credit, but ultimately day three guys are very much dart throws, so I don't want to like over like value this class based on like my personal like I like this guy, and then he's just like a fourth, fifth round pick. So how much impact is he really going to make? That's why I got to give it a B. I'm a little disappointed. I don't think anyone in this class necessarily stands out as a certain impact player to where I feel better about the Bills going forward. So I can't really give them much shinier of a grade than that. So I'm rolling with a B right now. Moving forward, though, to our next team, and that's the Carolina Panthers, a team that really kind of surprised in that first round, adding Monroe Freeling, offense tackle out of Georgia. There's been some really concerning news about Ekwonu, but I thought they were going to kind of roll forward with the just signings that they had this offseason to where they felt comfortable with their offensive line. But ultimately, Freeling is a high upside offensive tackle that can potentially be their long term answer at left tackle. I liked him a lot, so it's not necessarily a question of value. Bailey, this is an exciting selection and one that is definitely an investment in the right spot. If you have any questions about the offensive line, it's never a wrong idea to go forward and put in the value and assets towards it. What are your thoughts on Freeling and this selection for the Panthers?
Yeah, he's an interesting upside tackle here. There's not a lot of pressure from the start year one. Like you said, they have Rasheed Walker at left tackle and Taylor Moton holding down the right spot for now. But Moton is getting older and Walker's on the 1 year deal. And like you said, we're not sure what's going to happen with Aquanu. I think he's going to be a pretty nice swing tackle for them year one, and then maybe in year two or the next free agency they have a decision to make where you can slide into either spot. I'm never going to hate on a team taking too much tackles. You can never. I always think that you can never have enough tackles, and I'm kind of going through this draft, and I'm wondering how well the NFL is perceiving next year's offensive tackle class because a lot of people are kind of willingly taking backups in the first round, which is not something we usually see out of positions. But for offensive tackles, a bit more defensible.
Definitely. So moving forward to round two and three, they added Lee Hunter, defensive lineman out of Texas Tech, not Texas Hunter. Apologies for the graphics there. And then in round three, Chris Brazell, the second wide receiver out of Tennessee. Bailey, these are two guys that were probably some of the best players in college football last season. As prospects, maybe not viewed as highly, but still viewed highly enough to go in that first 2 days of this draft. Hunter's an interesting one because they have Bobby Brown and Derek Brown on that defensive line. Adding another nose tackle is definitely intriguing, maybe a little weird, but at the same time, it's not a question of Lee Hunter's talent. So maybe it's a situation where they say, hey, Bobby Brown's solid, but we think we can upgrade with a guy like Lee Hunter here. And then Chris Brazell's a guy that the upside's undeniable. He's got great playmaking ability and great size. It's just a question of can that production really translate to the NFL when he's outside that Tennessee pass happy scheme that maybe is a little friendly to wide receivers. So two guys that I think have some high ceilings in terms of just overall impact they can have. But Bailey, I want to know your thoughts on just do you think they're going to accomplish those ceilings or get close?
Yeah, the Panthers' first 3 picks, I mean, I would consider all 3 of these backups right now. I'm not sure if they, any of them really have a starting spot right now. Lee Hunter, like you said, they already have Bobby Brown and Derek Brown. They had Ashawn Robinson who played like a lot of snaps for them last year, and he departed, and they obviously need somebody to fill that gap. But I mean, they signed Tershawn Wharton to a pretty large deal. And I mean, I think he was injured and he didn't play that many snaps. So I kind of thought he would step into that. I probably would like to see him, go in a different direction. Maybe get a day 3 guy, defensive tackle, who can be your 4th D line and rotate in. But I mean, Brown, Hunter, and Derek Brown, 2 Browns there. Yeah, sorry, I thought I said much than once, but like those 3, you're not running on this front. They're gonna stonewall you at every chance they get. So I kind of like that approach. Stop the run, and hopefully you can figure out the pass rush later. And Brazil is, he's a field stretcher. He adds an interesting dimension to that team. But again, I don't know if he's a starter. I kind of like what the Panthers have in their wide receiver room right now. So I'm not sure if I see him, being that productive year 1.
Yeah, he's definitely someone that I think is supposed to be the explosive playmaker, complementing guys like McMillan and Coker, who probably are better winning in that like kind of 10, 15 yards downfield or underneath type route running. So I get it from a scheme fit. Hunter, you're right on Ashawn Robinson. It's just, I do think that they kind of want like Bobby Brown, Derek Brown, and then like Treshawn Wharton as your kind of like designated pass rusher defensive lineman. So I don't know if they want to go with like the 3 stone walls. I get it, but it feels almost like you're drafting a nose tackle kind of early, which I guess can pay off. But I don't know. I probably would have liked to see them invest in someone who's going to have more of an immediate impact. Moving forward to day 3, though, Will Lee, cornerback out of Texas A&M to start off in round 4. Then in the 5th round, they got Sam Hecht, center out of Kansas State, and Zach Key Wheatley, safety from Penn State. Then they didn't have a 6th round pick, but in the 7th round, they added Jackson Kuwach, linebacker out of Miami, Ohio. Bailey, the guy I want to talk about in this haul for day 3 is Sam Hecht, the center from Kansas State, a guy that I think really could compete for that starting job. I know they signed Luke Fortner, but I'm not buying that. I really like Sam Hecht. He was a guy that was my center too, a guy that I thought was overall just very dependable, nice mover, good athlete, and just someone that I felt like had the experience coming in that really I think is easy to buy into. He was the guy that was starting at center over Cooper Beebe, if I'm not mistaken. Beebe was over at left tackle, over at left guard. He probably could have moved over to center if it weren't for a guy like Hecht. And I think there's a reason for that. He's such a smart player, and I think someone that is going to be an immediate impact player for the Panthers, despite being a 5th round pick in this draft.
Yeah, he's certainly. I think he can compete for that job. The guy I want to talk about is Zakee Wheatley. I think I mentioned this also last year with Ransom. That Panthers safety room is really thin. Ransom did play a little bit in there, but I'm pretty sure Nick Scott and Trayvon Morey played pretty much 100% of the snaps there. And, Wheatley's joined that room where, again, there's not a lot of competition. If an injury happens or they want some 3 safety looks, I think Wheatley's going to be that guy, especially if they're looking for like a single high or a more rangy guy to kind of center field that defense there.
Yeah, we've been talking about draft picks, but I think also the lack of draft pick at running back is pretty interesting. It sounds like Jonathan Brooks is going to get an open opportunity to really compete for that RB2 spot after injuries kind of set him back. Maybe Trevor Etienne's going to be in the mix heavier this season, the guy that I liked last draft cycle. So going to be interesting to see what happens with that running back room, especially when they chose not to address the position in this draft. But Bailey, overall, what is your grade for this haul when it comes to the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, I give the Panthers a B. I do like this draft a lot, but I mean, this is a lot of backups, and this is not like the draft, a team who just kind of had that surprise playoff run. And they're taking it to the Rams, they almost beat them, not for like kind of a 4th quarter comeback by them. But that's not kind of the draft this has on them. I would like to see a little more urgency, a little bit more instant impact instead of like, okay, here's a backup, here's a backup, here's a backup. So yeah, I mean, I like the players, don't like the kind of mentality.
Yeah, I feel like the values they got on guys were pretty solid to where I don't have like a lot of issues with the draft itself. It's just a question of team building and really kind of seeing if this team can kind of take those next steps, despite maybe not getting like the instant contributors or instant upgrades to the draft. I gave it a B as well. Or I guess not as well, but I gave it a B here in a situation where I don't have questions on the players. I like the impact that they made in free agency on their defense, but I would have liked to see a little bit more icing on the cake with this draft more so than just like reapplying to places that I felt like were somewhat already taken care of. Moving forward, though, to the next team, and that's the Chicago Bears, a team fresh off of an intriguing playoff run. In the first round, they got Dylan Thieneman, center or safety out of Oregon. Bailey, this is a guy that we were talking about, maybe in that Minnesota, Carolina, maybe even Philadelphia range, but ultimately ended up going to the Bears here at number 25. A team that was pretty aggressive in reflipping their secondary, especially in that safety room, getting their pass defense resecured and set up for what they hope will be a successful playoff run. Do you think Thieneman can be that key piece for this defense to where they can really kind of look at 2026 in a new light when it comes to their pass defense?
Yeah, I mean, the Bears made a really risky move when they let both their starting safeties walk, and they got Kobe Bryant from the Seahawks, and now they dropped the Edmund to kind of complete that room. That's a nice flip. I mean, those two guys are probably better, well, not better, but they're on par with the guys that you got, and the potential to be better with time. And Tiedemann's kind of like that ideal two high safety. He has the athletic ability and he has the closing speed to really shine in that role. And could have gone really better for the Bears here in round one.
He's an exciting player, and I think he's one of the more instinctual safeties in this class. He's my free safety one. I had Caleb Downs as my top overall safety, but Thieneman's a very impressive player, and I think he's going to be a very good piece for that Chicago defense. Moving forward to day two, in round two, they added Logan Jones, center out of Iowa, and then in the third round, they added Sam Roush, tight end out of Stanford, and then surprised people with the selection of Xavier Thomas, wide receiver out of LSU. Bailey, I know you have some thoughts on that third selection, but overall, starting from Logan Jones, what are your thoughts on the day two haul for Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, these picks kind of, took me off guard. I mean, the Thieneman pick made a lot of sense to me. They had a pretty big need at safety, but with Logan Jones, they made the Garrett Bradbury trade with the Patriots. Could have, taken their starting center, and I thought they were just okay to roll with him. Maybe they'll take a guy later, as this was a pretty good center class. But they took Logan Jones in the second, and Logan Jones is an awesome player, and I think he's a better scheme fit for what the Bears like to do than Bradbury. So maybe Bradbury just the insurance in case they couldn't get him. I don't. I expect Jones to at least compete for the starting job this year. Maybe he'll start in year two, but this is a pretty aggressive pick. Usually you don't take centers in the second round, and if you do, they're probably going to start year one. So to take that maybe a guy who might be a backup is a very very aggressive move. And Sam Roush, also another backup pick, probably the tight end three for them this year, and then eventually take over for Cole Kmet in that inline role as Loveland. It's kind of more of the move tight end. So I like that, and he'll see some play year one also. The Bears run a good amount of three tight end sets. So I mean, I like that pick. And Xavier Thomas, um, I don't really have any words for this pick. I didn't see this coming. I wasn't expecting his name. I was expecting receiver, but I mean, we might have to let the Bears slide on this one, considering how well they drafted in last year's class and with the rest of their picks.
Yeah, I like Logan Jones, and I kind of get it drafting him whenever you have Bradbury, just because Bradbury's on a 1 year contract, and you kind of understand that he's probably not your long term answer. So if you have a high enough grade on Logan Jones, I don't hate the idea of just saying, look, even if he sits for a year, this is our long term center. We might as well go and get him. Sam Rashi, guy that I was extremely high on at the tight end position. He's my tight end two overall. A guy that I said was a potential first round, second round grade for me. Went in the third round. I like the pick. I think he's kind of capped now to where he's not going to make me look smart for having him as my tight end too. It's just probably going to be like a Cole Kmet type. I think he'll fill in very well in that role, and I think he'll still provide a lot of value. But I do wish they maybe landed somewhere else. Not going to fault the Bears for that, but ultimately, whatever. Moving forward to Xavier Thomas, this is a guy that I wrote on my scouting report. I'd like to see him at running back, and I'm kind of curious to see if the Bears maybe utilize him in that way. I think he's going to be mostly just a return guy, special teams usage, and maybe like the Zacchaeus type role for this offense. But this is a guy that's very fast, very shifty with the ball in his hand. So I'm excited to see what type of usage he gets. If it is just strictly special teams, I think they probably pulled the trigger a little too early. But if this is someone that they're saying, man, we think this can be a utility piece for our offense, we plug him a little bit in at receiver, maybe get him some snaps out of the backfield as a receiving threat and just overall electric playmaker that we can get outside the tackles and just create some juice there because we have like Monongai and then we have Swift, but we want someone who's maybe a little more electric working outside. Then there's a chance for decent return on value here. But overall, that's probably not going to be the case, and it's just a little bit of a reach. But sometimes you just got to value special teams, and I think Xavier Thomas can contribute in that regard. Moving forward to our day three selections, we have Malik Muhammad, cornerback out of Texas, in the fourth round. In the fifth round, we have Keyshawn Elliott, the linebacker from Arizona State. And then in the sixth round, we have Jordan Vandenberg, defensive lineman out of Georgia Tech. Bailey, the guy that I want to talk about is Jordan Vandenberg, an exciting athletic defensive lineman who really kind of popped on draft maps when it came to his pro day testing. And he turned in some really impressive numbers to where a lot of people were saying, okay, let's go check this guy out. He didn't get a combine invite, but obviously deserved it. This is a guy that on tape showed a lot of flashes as a pass rusher. Still needs to be better in the run game, but I think overall there's a lot to buy into for what he can bring on the interior. He's got great size, 6'3", 310 pounds. He's an exciting player with some solid production. I think he can be a guy that develops into a steady contributor for this Bears defense, where they've really kind of been seeking out some impact from the interior defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, all three of their day three selections, I think, are pretty intriguing guys. Like Keyshawn Elliott, I think, is going to be a nice special teams guy, and somebody who works their way up that linebacker depth chart. But I want to talk about Malik Muhammad. A bit of a surprise declare for him, I think, especially with where he ended up in the draft. He wasn't a top 100 pick. Probably could have returned to school, added some weight, and then maybe he would have been a top 100 player next year. But I mean, he declared and he slips out, and he lands on the Bears, kind of the perfect landing spot for him in terms of opportunity in round 4, where the Bears don't really have like their cornerback 3 spot locked down. I think right now they're giving it to Tyreek Stevenson, who obviously has an up and down relationship with the team. I mean, he got benched a couple times, so I mean, Muhammad can compete. He's has the ability to cover wide receiver ones and against kind of the wide receiver threes in the league. I think he's somebody who can really succeed. Obviously, like I said, he needs to bulk up, he needs to strengthen up. He gets bullied a little bit too much, but this is somebody I see winning a job out of camp, Michael, in that day 3, which it's always a nice find in the draft.
Absolutely. So now when it comes to the draft grades, what are your thoughts on the Chicago Bears haul?
I mean, I like the Enderman. I like the Enderman pick, but besides that, I mean, I didn't love the needs portion of this draft. So I had to give them a C. Like, they have such a need at edge rusher. They have a need at tackle after Ozzie Trapilo went down, and they have a need at wide receiver. And Xavier Thomas is obviously a wide receiver, but maybe a more well-rounded guy, like we said with the Falcons, somebody who can contribute a bit more right away. So I mean, those are high value positions. These are not just kind of like we didn't get a safety or a corner. Like, I mean, or center. Like, who cares if you don't have those? You can get those guys for pretty cheap, but I mean, these are positions that are going to bite you in the ass if you don't have the depth and if it gets exposed at the next level. So, or I mean, in a playoff run, somebody gets injured. So, I don't know. I hope they have some free agency moves lined up that we don't know about yet. But as the roster stands, I still see some major holes here, even after having some picks on this draft.
Yeah, I'm giving it a B minus. I think the players that they got were talented enough. There's just some questionable decisions. I mean, taking a guy like Xavier Thomas, I can get just in a vacuum. But I mean, when you look at the board, I mean, there's guys like Chris Bell on the board that I think serve pretty well in that Ben Johnson offense, and maybe the kind of role and usage is an overlap. But there's enough talented wide receivers on the board to where there's probably better served options and weapons that can contribute to this team in a better way than what you get from Xavier Thomas early in this draft. So I don't know. There's still some questions in terms of just like asset usage. But overall, I don't really have a question with like the talent of the like 6 other picks on this board. So I can't really fault them too much. But I don't know. There's just like something missing from the Chicago Bears draft. And I think it's probably just the lack of addressing some of the biggest needs on this team, especially on the offensive line. But moving forward now to the Cincinnati Bengals. And to start things off, they had Cassius Howell in the second round and Tacario Davis in the third, cornerback from Washington. Bailey, obviously they traded their first round pick for Dexter Lawrence, but the day 2 selections of Cassius Howell and Tacario Davis are intriguing selections to continue bolstering a defense that they have not been shy about wanting to improve. Do you think the defense is now fixed, or do you think there's still plenty of issues to go around?
I mean, it's the Bengals. There's always going to be plenty of issues on their defense, but I do think with the Dexter Lawrence trade, they kind of shifted their window now to be a little bit more aggressive. And I like that they were a little bit more. I think they were a little bit more on this day too. Cassius Howell is not someone who you can really depend on for the run defense, but as a pass rusher, the Bengals defense last year really lacked that pass rushing punch, and he's someone who can absolutely provide that for them. Someone who's talks in round 1, maybe to a team that needed that too. So getting him in round 2 is pretty good. And Tacario Davis, have a high weight speed corner guy. I don't expect him to start, but a nice developmental piece for the Bengals here in case an injury happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of strange for the Bengals. They've usually gone after the bigger defensive end, so it's surprising to see them go after a smaller one here. But it seems as though they're fine with that. They are getting a guy that they think they can trust as just this impactful, kind of productive enough guy to where they aren't really willing to pass on him, despite maybe not meeting their kind of height, weight, length standards that they've typically gone for in the past. But moving forward now to day 3 in the 4th round, they get Connor Lew, center out of Auburn, and Colby Young, wide receiver out of Georgia. In the 6th round, they get Brian Parker, the second center from Duke, maybe offensive guard, we'll see. And then in the 7th round, they get Jack Endries, tight end from Texas, and Landon Robinson, the defensive lineman from Navy. Bailey, I know you want to talk about Landon Robinson, so I'll go to the centers. I want to talk about Connor Lew and Brian Parker the second, two guys that I think are going to be competing to be the long-term center for this team. And I kind of like the mentality of saying, hey, like, maybe we do like Connor Lew with our 4th round pick, but we aren't going to be so overconfident about it to where we completely ignore it. So they bring in another center prospect like Brian Parker, who they probably had graded similarly to Lew, but they realized he fell far enough, and they say, look, I mean, it's better to have two guys that we think can maybe be the answer long term than to have one as a day 3 selection where the hit rate is so low, and then eventually find out in a couple of years that it's not going to be someone we can trust. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're going to have an answer, but I like the mentality of saying, hey, we can be wrong when it comes to our evaluations, even if we get like a value we like on day 3. So let's double dip, let them compete, let two young guys see what the development path is for them, and see if one of them can be the answer. And I kind of like that mentality when you're able to be patient with them because you have Ted Karras starting right now.
Yeah, I mean, you have like 3 pretty good centers in there. I'm not sure about the asset kind of allocation approach of that, but yeah, Landon Robinson, like I said, if you watch the sleeper video, he was in there. He's one of my guys that I thought was a bit underrated in the draft, and the other guys fared better than him. I think he was the lowest drafted guy, but they all did get drafted, which is nice. And I mean, he joins a pretty loaded defensive line room. There's not a lot of ability, I think, for him to see the field in pass rushing snaps. But in those situations, the 3rd and longs and 2nd and longs, I think will see the field a little bit. And if you can get over the height, he's one of the best penetrators in this class, and someone I think can make an instant impact if he manages his way to see the field.
So Bailey, when it comes to draft grades, maybe not the biggest class, or at least not the earliest opportunities for selections, but still a nice impact, I think, from this call. Personally, for me, I'm giving it another B. I feel like I keep going back to the B well, and maybe it's overused at this rate, but I think the impact and ability that you're seeing from these prospects is intriguing enough to where I'm not really doubting too much on just like the overall asset usage. I think they spent it in a nice way to where I'm giving them a B, and I want to see what this Bengals team can become because it seems like they've gotten the message of, hey, we need to invest in our trenches. We need to invest in our defense. And they've taken some nice steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm a bit harsh. I'm a hater, so I gave him a C. The Bengals drafts, I don't know, their front office approach. Everything's always going to be slightly off. It's never going to align, I think, perfectly with the needs in the BPA just because of how they operate. But I mean, I do like the players they drafted, so this is probably higher than average of what I would give their past drafts. But yeah, I can't really co-sign this draft as a positive step forward for their organization.
Fair enough. Now moving over to the AFC North foe of theirs, and that's the Cleveland Browns, a team that got busy right away by trading down from number 6 to number 9 and getting Spencer Fano, offensive lineman out of Utah. Then they were back up in the first later on, and they got Casey Concepcion, wide receiver out of Texas A&M. And then in the 2nd round, they had 2 picks again, where they got Denzel Boston, wide receiver from Washington, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, the safety from Toledo. In the 3rd round, they added Austin Barber, offensive tackle out of Florida, and they got a little break on day 3, but then they returned in the 5th round, where they got Parker Brailsford, center out of Alabama, Justin Jefferson, linebacker out of Alabama, Joe Royer, tight end out of Cincinnati, and then in the 6th round, they got Taylor Green, quarterback from Arkansas, and 7th round, Carson Ryan, tight end from BYU. Bailey, we'll start off with the 1st round, where they got Fano and Casey Concepcion. Exciting players, exciting ability, but there's still been some heavy criticism for those that are maybe not as intrigued by the two. Where do you stand on these two players?
I mean, I love Fano and Concepcion. I like the trade back by the Browns, and they still get their guy at 9, but just I think a lesson a lot of other teams in this draft can learn where you have the ability to trade back, and your guy still will be there if you read the board correctly, and he should slot in anywhere on their line. I'm not exactly sure I don't think I saw their press conference of where they plan on starting him, but I'm sure they just gave the generic. He'll compete everywhere, so he'll be part of their best five. So I like that approach. And Concepcion in Boston, who's a little in the second round, a little bit of a spoiler, but won the group team together. I love this double dip, and I think Concepcion and Boston are different enough of receivers where they can see the field at the same time. Concepcion's more like that speed, agility, yards after catch guy, and then Boston's more like the linear speed, big bodied guy. So I think they complement each other very well. And the Browns completely overhauled their wide receiver room in one draft, which is something I really like to see out of them.
Yeah, I mean, the big question was, are they going to roll with their quarterbacks? And if so, how are they going to help the situation around them? And they bolstered the trenches and they added some wide receiver help. So I think they've done a nice job. I think both Concepcion and Boston can find ways to start and contribute to the team without really, like you said, overlapping in usage. And I really trust Fano to be a dependable piece on the offensive line, no matter where it is he plays. Talk about McNeil Warren and Austin Barber. I think Barber's the guy that's probably going to be more of a swing tackle. So maybe not like the overall impact you'd like to see out of third rounder, where maybe you're hoping to get like a great starter that's just like a steal in value. But I still think there is value in getting guy to really kind of help add depth to that offensive line, especially one that's kind of been as unreliable as Cleveland's. And then also Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I'm curious to see what ends up happening for him because I feel like you know, he's probably a little bit overlapped with Grant Delpit there in that Cleveland secondary. But I do think that McNeil Warren's a good enough player to where I like the fit, and I like to see just his long term outlook for that Browns defense because him, Hickman, and Delpit are talented players to where that secondary can be very intriguing moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, McNeil Warren a bit of a draft day fall for him, and I think the Browns. One of the things they do well is identify guys who are falling, and being like, even though we don't need this guy, he's probably too talented to pass on him. And I've always liked that approach more than it's like, we don't need this guy, but we like him, so we'll take them. If you see extreme value on the board, take them. But if you don't need them, go take somebody else. And Austin Barber, like you said, somebody who's not probably capable of starting right now. But I mean, the Browns still do need a swing tackle, and I think Barber has that ability. And maybe they try Fana on a guard and they start Barber. There's some weird offensive line combinations that they could do if they're feeling crazy and if Barber expresses in camp.
Fair enough. Yeah. So moving forward to those day three picks we talked about, is there anyone that you feel like stands out from the rest of the selections?
Yeah, Taylor Green. Somebody I was I've been surprised that the Browns took, but I mean, this guy is the most athletic QB in this class. He has the size, he has the athleticism to really, take off in this league. And he joins a pretty crowded QB room. But I mean, when you take a guy like Green, you kind of have to understand that you got to let him have 2 to 3 years as he learns to develop the skills as a quarterback from a mechanical and field standpoint. And the Browns are a team that's pretty patient with their QB. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what happens in that camp battle. I'm not sure if, you know, Green is going to make their 53 man, but I have confidence that even if he ends up on a practice squad, he can work his way up to a QB2, QB3 role.
Yeah, I'm excited for Green. I think there's a chance for him to compete. A guy I want to talk about is Justin Jefferson, an exciting linebacker, especially on a defense where Owusu Koromoa, it sounds like he's probably going to have to retire and just isn't going to be able to return to football. So, getting a guy like Justin Jefferson, who I think has the nice kind of coverage instincts and played opposite of Deontay Lawson, now gets to join opposite of Carson Schwessinger and play in a linebacker unit with Quincy Williams. I think it's a really nice fit and allows him to kind of play to his skills while having other pieces in that linebacker room to where he really is kind of benefiting as like a cleanup guy that can trust his instincts because he has other reliable and dependable pieces that can help make up any mistakes that he makes. So this is a guy that I think showed a lot of flashes in his 1 year starting in Alabama, and I'm excited to see what can happen for him. I don't know if destiny will allow two dominant Justin Jeffersons in the NFL, but it wouldn't shock me if this Justin Jefferson is, a little bit better than this fifth round draft slot. So, Bailey, when it comes to the draft grade for the Browns, personally, I think I'm going to go with a nice B plus. I like the value. I think they did a nice job flipping the positional rooms that definitely needed the help. I do have some questions, and I think there's enough doubt out there around some of these prospects to where I can see maybe this like not being the greatest draft class when we look back at it in like 5 years, to where that maybe probably holds me back from an A minus or an A. But there's still enough intrigue and personal evaluation that I like it enough to say, good job to the Browns.
Yeah, last year I gave the Browns an F, and I stuck by that on the review. I still think that draft class is not going to age well. But here I'm giving the Browns an A. They've redeemed themselves. They've gone these high value positions I'm talking about. No, they completely overhauled their O line in one off season. I mean, there's still holes in the rosters because of how bad last year's draft was. But I mean, here it's hard to really complain or poke holes in any of the decisions they made. They got great high value players at high value positions. You can't really ask for more when you have all those premium picks.
Makes sense to me. So moving forward now to the Dallas Cowboys, a team that also got fairly busy in the first round with the 11th pick. They had a Caleb Downs safety out of Ohio State. And then later on that night with the 23rd pick, they got Malachi Lawrence, edge rusher out of Central Florida. They skipped out on day two or in the second round, but then in the third round, they had a Jayshon Barham, edge rusher out of Michigan. And then on day three, they had 3 fourth-round picks where they got Drew Shelton, offensive tackle out of Penn State, Devin Moore, cornerback out of Florida, and LT Overton, the edge slash defensive lineman from Alabama. And then on the last round of the night, they got Anthony Smith, wide receiver from ECU. So we'll start with that first round. Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence. Bailey, what are your thoughts on these two players?
Yeah, I mean the Cowboys are rumored to be one of the more aggressive teams in moving up in this draft, and when they have the 12th and 20th pick, and they end up making a smaller trade up to 11, and they land Caleb Downs, and this is just kind of a perfect case scenario for them. Somebody talented like Downs just fell in the draft into their laps, and they get a high. Maybe not a high, positional value guy, but a leader on their defense and someone who can completely flip a defense from bad to good in one season. And Malachi Lawrence is somebody I'm a little less high on. I mean, he's pretty explosive, but I mean, he's a bit too stiff to me, and I don't love him in the running game. So it seemed like the NFL really liked this guy, and I can see why. But he's definitely more of a developmental piece than I think the traditional edge one, the traditional round one edges are.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with the defensive approach because obviously the offense was firing on all cylinders last season, and now they just needed to really get the other side of the team kind of fixed up. And I think a guy like Downs is so impactful, whether it's noticeable or not. He just provides such safety and dependability from that last line of defense to where you can really trust him all over the field. I comped him to Eric Berry, and I know that Eric Berry is considered like one of the greatest safeties of this generation. I think Downs has that upside, and then Malachi Lawrence is a guy that I really like. And yeah, I understand the overall play control is definitely a question, but I think that speed and just overall just variance in his technique when it comes to his pass rushing is so intriguing that I trust him to continue to contribute as a pass rusher at the next level. So two exciting picks and two guys that I'm expecting to make an impact. And I really do like the direction that the Cowboys took it when it came to their day one selections. So on that day two, we talked about Barham, just one selection there. What do you make of Jayshon Barham and his role with the team? And we're gonna combine it, actually. We're gonna talk about all 5 of these picks because they didn't make a lot on day 3 either. So just we'll talk about Barham and maybe one guy who stands out to you, Bailey.
Yeah, for Barham, I think the Cowboys said they're going to use him at inside linebacker, which is super interesting to me because I thought he flashed pretty nicely in that edge role, but they had a greater need, I guess, at inside linebacker. I mean, he did play there for 3 seasons before transitioning to edge, so the reverse Micah Parsonsing him, I guess is the word. So I'm excited to see how that pans out for them. And I mean, he still can rush the passer. And in terms of favorite day 3 pick, I like the LT Overton. I mean, the Cowboys have 3 guys with the word edge next to their name, and Lawrence, Barham, and Overton. But I think Lawrence is the only guy who's end up playing edge for them. Really, like Barham's going to be linebacker, and Overton I think is going to be a guy who's going to back up a lot of positions on that defensive line. You kind of line him up anywhere, and he's going to provide you with some solid run defense. He still does have some work to do in terms of his pass rush upside, but I mean, he should be a pretty valuable piece, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him play a ton of snaps year one.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Devin Moore, the cornerback from Florida, a guy that really kind of seemed to work his way up draft boards later on in the season because he finally put together a final like healthy year. And it's similar to the guys like Michael Wilson, where the talent was there. It was just can he stay consistently on the field and prove himself as a contributor? And Devin Moore did that this season. So a guy like Devin Moore here on day 3 in round 4, I think is intriguing value and a nice upside swing. He has great size, has some nice ball production from his lone season here with I think 2 interceptions. So he's a guy that I think is very intriguing and someone that I think could really make an impact despite maybe being like the day 3 selection where you may still have some questions about if he can step in and contribute. But I think he's someone that has potential and maybe still has some more game to grow into because he hasn't necessarily gotten on the field as much as he should have. Just 17 starts in his career so far. So definitely still has more football to learn. And if he can really kind of capitalize on that, he's got the frame to be a shutdown and very scary corner on the boundary. So when it comes to your grade, Bailey, what are you assessing this Dallas Cowboys draft as in your overall report card?
Yeah, I'm giving him a C. I think Caleb Downs is obviously like the crown jewel of the class, and he's gonna be the one to carry it forward. But I mean, they went very defensive heavy in this draft, and I'm not sure I see the vision of how they're all gonna fit in that defense. I mean, you got some versatile guys there, but when you have all the puzzle pieces in front of you and you're trying to complete it, I just don't see it.
Personally, I'm a lot higher on it. Caleb Downs was my number one overall player in the class, so to get him outside the top 10, I think is great value and an excellent addition for the Cowboys. I liked Lawrence, I liked Barham. Even though the round 4 picks weren't as exciting for me, I still like this class overall. So I'm giving it a B plus, and maybe that's even hating on it a little bit because getting the number one player in the class for me outside the top 10 should probably already have it in like the A range, and when I like Lawrence and Barham, it should just automatically seal it. But yeah, I just felt like the day 3 selections overall, I wasn't as enthralled with, and I would have liked to either see them trade down and just add some more picks and more dart throws, or get some different players that were available on the board at that time. So moving forward now to the Denver Broncos, and this is a team that traded for Jalen Waddle, ended up not having any picks in the first 2 rounds. They started out their draft in the 3rd round where they got Tyler on Onyedim, defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. In the 4th round, they double dipped where they had Jonah Coleman, running back out of Washington, and then they got Cage Casey, offensive lineman from Boise State. In the 5th round, they got Justin Jolie, the tight end from North Carolina State. And then in the 7th round, they made triple appearances where they had Miles Scott, safety out of Illinois, not Indiana, Dalen Bentley, tight end out of Utah, and Red Murdoch, linebacker from Buffalo, as Mr. Irrelevant. Bailey, we're just talking about all these guys right here, right now, because most of these picks were later on. So who's one guy from this haul that really stands out to you?
I just want to talk about Anya Dean really quick. The Broncos obviously traded down, and they accumulated a lot of picks, which is I think is the right approach after they made that kind of big trade for Jalen Waddle and gave up I think 2026 picks to get him. So good job on them recouping some value. And the only real need was the defensive line depth with Anya Dean. Obviously addresses. And in terms of my favorite pick on day 3, I really like Justin Jolie. I mean, I think he's going to be used similar to how the Broncos used Ingram, kind of split out at receiver. And he's young, he has room to grow. And Ingram is, on a bigger contract and he's getting kind of older. He's not going to be on the team forever. So I think Jolie can really develop into that role and eventually take over the job.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Mr. Irrelevant, Red Murdoch, a guy that I really like at the linebacker room. It wouldn't shock me if this is a guy that we're talking about as maybe like Alex Singleton's replacement in Denver. He's a guy that is really good in the run game, really dependable, really kind of seeks out the underneath stuff. He's not necessarily the greatest athlete, so he's not someone you're going to be trusting to drop into coverage. But overall, I mean, this is a Denver team that was talked about as liking the linebackers, wanting to find someone that they can really kind of plug into their lineup. They ended up not addressing the position until the very last pick, but it wouldn't shock me if Murdoch provides enough to that room to where the need is no longer as prevalent moving forward. Don't count him out entirely. Maybe not a Brock Purdy type Mr. Irrelevant situation, but this guy could definitely get some snaps as early as this year. So when it comes to your overall draft grade on the Denver Broncos, Bailey, what are you giving this class?
I'm giving them B. I like the players they took. Their day 3 haul was in particular pretty nice. I like a lot of the guys they got in. I mean, it's kind of hard to fault their approach to this draft, but I kind of when you look at their assets they have, I wonder if they should have offloaded some of the Jalen Wall cost into 2027 a bit more because this draft was a little bit dry. And I mean, Ani Deem is cool, but he's like a backup, and the team doesn't need anything really. Like their team is like their 22 starters are set. So I mean, I don't fault them too much, and maybe they like the 2027 class a lot more. But I like the players they got. It's a solid B.
Yeah, this is a weird class to grade just because we saw last year, like John A. Barron just didn't even play for the Broncos because they were like, we just have too much talent in our secondary. And it's tough for young players on such good teams and such deep teams to kind of find pathways to play. So I don't know how much impact any of these guys are going to make. And maybe they're just served as depth that maybe can work themselves into the replacements of the current starters. But overall, I would probably give it like a B minus. I didn't necessarily love a lot of the picks. I wasn't super high on Yadim, so that kind of tanks it a little bit even further for me. But it's not necessarily like a bad class. Like I like the picks they made. It's just they're all day three picks, so it's hard to get too amped up about it. So assessing it from that lens, I'd probably give it up to like a B minus, B. But I don't know. I'll say B minus. That's my final grade. Now we go forward to the Detroit Lions, a team that was disappointed with their 2025 campaign not making the playoffs. So they go into this draft looking to revamp the offensive line where they get Blake Miller, offensive tackle out of Clemson. In the second round, they get Derek Moore, edge rusher from Michigan. Then they are not back until day 3 where they get Jimmy Rolder, linebacker out of Michigan. And then in the 5th round, they get Keith Abney, cornerback from Arizona State. And then they also had Kendrick Law, wide receiver from Kentucky. In the 6th round, they get Skylar Gill-Howard, defensive lineman from Texas Tech. And round 7, they finish it off with Tyree West, defensive lineman / edge rusher from Tennessee. Bailey, we'll start in that first round. Blake Miller, a guy that slots in at right tackle. It felt like Dan Campbell kind of pinpointed this guy from a while out. What are your thoughts on Blake Miller? Do you think this can help kind of restore the identity of the dominant Detroit Lions offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Lions, this was their backup option heading into the draft. I think they really wanted Proctor, and they landed on Miller. Miller is kind of like, that gritty right tackle. He has the starting experience, and he'll slide in as a starter opposite Sewell, who slides over to the left tackle spot. But I mean, I have a lot of questions about Miller's pro readiness. I mean, he is the most experienced out of the guards, or I mean, out of the tackles that were available at the pick. So, I mean, I don't, hate it from that perspective, but I don't know. I think they're gonna maybe regret not making a better offer to trade up for Proctor. I'm just not a huge Miller fan.
I'm not super high on Miller, but I do think this was the Lions guy, honestly, because I mean, Dan Campbell was talking about moving Sewell over to left tackle from like January on, so it just felt like they had a guy in mind. Some of the other right tackle prospects in this class were guys that didn't necessarily feel like certainly attainable at their draft slot, like Maui Noah, Fano, guys like that. Ihanator maybe could have been in the cards as well for them, but I think it was Miller all along. So it makes a lot of sense for them to reel him in now. But yeah, I mean, I'm not as high on Miller, and I do have questions about his long term outlook. He's a guy that has like 40 plus starts and still a lot of developmental issues. Play strength still needs development, and just overall pass rush sets, could use some work. But there is, that trustworthy, dependable play to play ability that he brings to the table that I think a guy like Dan Campbell it's easy for him to buy into, and Brad Holmes obviously as well. So I understand the appeal and why they went that way. Personally, I probably would have gone in the direction of some of the other offensive tackles that were on the board. But moving to that day 2 selection of Derek Moore, an edge rusher that you and me both kind of liked, Bailey, heading into this draft cycle. We thought he was someone that could go a little bit higher, ended up going in that second round pretty early over some other notable edge rushers in this class. What do you think of Moore playing opposite of Aiden Hutchinson going forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, needs approach draft for the Lions. I mean, they needed an offensive tackle and an edge rusher, and that's who they ended up getting. And again, with Miller, I think this is a bit of a reach for the Lions. I mean, Moore is somebody that they're desperate for somebody across Hutchinson, and Moore is probably the best guy they had great on the board. And we need an edge, so let's go take an edge. But I have serious questions also about Moore's run defense. But I mean, the pass rush upside is undeniable. And I mean, he can grow. He has the tools to be a good run defender, but I just don't see it right now. But I mean, these first 2 picks for Lions, they both hit their needs, but I'm not super excited about these players.
That's understandable. For me, I feel like Moore is one of the most intriguing players in terms of block control off the edge, but he just needs to learn to disengage to actually capitalize on that dominance that he has. Like off the snap, he converts speed to power pretty well to where he can make an impact on the backfield, but to actually close and finish on the football, you need to be better at just breaking off of that contact. And that's where Moore kind of lacks. But I think that's easy to buy into as a developmental upside guy. I think he has the run defensive tools, like you said. So I think he can be an intriguing and exciting piece opposite of Hutchinson. It's just he still needs to grow into that. For day 3, I'm going to snipe him, make sure that I get him secured. How can you not talk about Keith Abney, a guy that I think is just so exciting in zone coverage, so aggressive and physical, plays bigger than his frame. But he's a guy that I really like, and I think he breaks on the ball so well. Just is going to be a guy that I think is probably thrust into playtime at cornerback. The Lions have consistently had durability issues in their secondary, but I think he's going to be the guy that kind of answers that question of, can we get a long-term answer at cornerback? I think Abney's going to be the guy who solves that for this team in 2026.
Yeah, he's certainly somebody who fell in the draft a little bit. It's a bit surprising to see him fall all the way to fifth. I'm not sure if there's an injury or off-field thing with him. But for me, I want to talk about Jimmy Roller a little bit. He I think is more of a special teams guy, but I mean the Lions, another team really thin at that linebacker position. So I mean, it really wouldn't really shock me if he was somebody who sees some starting snaps at the linebacker spot. He has some good athleticism. He's like an NFL body, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's running out there around Jack Campbell during times during this year.
It's an exciting class and just some intriguing potential here on day three. So, Bailey, overall, what's your assessment for this Detroit Lions draft?
I give them a C minus. I mean, I do credit the Lions for understanding they had two huge needs at offensive tackle and at edge rusher. I mean, they went out and got them, but I think they left value on the board here. I don't know what they should have done. Honestly, maybe I'm hanging a bit too much. When I look at the full draft in the context, maybe this was their best decision. But I mean, maybe they could have gone like a different. Maybe she got an edge offensive tackle. Although I don't think the league took an offensive tackle in the second round, so maybe they weren't high on them. But I mean, I feel like there was ways around this. There's some stuff they could have done. I mean, they filled their needs, but I just don't like the value of these guys.
Yeah, I think compared to the board, there were just a lot of times where they drafted maybe a position I would have liked to see them draft, but there were other players that I liked more at the position. So for me, I'm giving them a C plus. I think some of the players are good. I like Derek Moore. I love the Keith Abney pick. Tyree West is someone that I think is very intriguing in that round 7 slot. But overall, Blake Miller just sings like the tackle that struggles right away, and then he like eventually turns into like a solid tackle to where like Lions fans are annoying on Twitter and they're like, "Oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Like Blake Miller's good now," and he's like still just kind of okay, but there's still like some very serious issues that plague him to where like when postseason rolls around, he struggles again, and then Lions fans get even more mad because they're like, "No, he's been good all season. You don't know what you're talking about." But I don't know. I have my questions about him, and I have my questions about this draft. But I like more. I like Abney. I like West to where I'm willing to give it like a over the average C grade to C plus, but still some questions about the overall use of assets. So moving forward to the Green Bay Packers, an in-division rival. Bailey, they were a team that had the second round pick where they got Brandon Cisse, and then in the third round they got Chris McClellan. We'll stay on day 2 for now. What are your thoughts on these selections for the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, I love Brandon Cisse, even though I spelled his name wrong in the graphic. Apologies to him. I had him as a first round grade at the cornerback position. I think he's going to be like an instant start for them. He's probably going to be their CB1. Honestly, he's kind of has this raw label, which I mean I understand, but I mean he's so athletic and he's so good in the man coverage that I don't really care about how kind of rough he is in the zone coverage. And Chris McClellan he's kind of a solid, dependable pick. Kind of boring. The Packers had a lot of defensive tackle depth, but they kind of been draining it just through trades and free agency losses. So he's somebody who I think can plug a couple holes for them and give them some solid snaps if needed.
Yeah, I really like Cisse, and I was talking about it pre-draft. I thought this guy was like locked into the first round based on what I had kind of heard around the NFL. So it's intriguing to see him fall to day 2, but I think it's good value for the Packers regardless. I don't like McClellan. I actually had him very low. I thought he was very boring and wasn't necessarily that good against the run to where I was not necessarily buying in, but I do think his fit with the Packers makes a lot of sense. I don't want to hate on him too much. I still think there's like upside and stuff, and he has like an exciting frame to where it's easy to buy into him. But I don't know. It's just personal assessment. I wasn't as high on him to where third round kind of shocked me for where he came off the board. But moving forward to day 3, in the fourth round, the Packers got denied Dennis Sutton, edge rusher out of Penn State. In the fifth round, they got Jaeger Burton, center from Kentucky. And then in the sixth round, they were up twice where they got Damani Jackson, cornerback from Alabama, and Trace Mack, kicker from Florida. Bailey, pick one of these guys and talk to me about what they could be in the NFL.
Oh man, do I have to? I mean, I'm not really a big fan of this Packers day 3. I mean, DDS was somebody I think guys were higher on than I was. I mean, this is a upper range of it taking him. I had a fifth round grade on him. I wasn't crazy about him. I think I had a UDFA grade on Burden, so I'm not going to talk about a kicker. So I'll talk about Damani Jackson, someone who's he's an athlete. He's a high upside athlete, but he's still a bit rough at that cornerback position. If he can learn the footwork and the timing, I think he can work his way into a starting role. But I mean, again, this is where about I would have taken him. He's probably just the best value guy I like, but I'm not crazy about this Packers day three.
Honestly, I like DDS. I think Denied Dennis Sutton is a guy that was still productive despite being so unrefined at Penn State that I'm willing to buy in to the potential and upside that he has as he enters the league. This is a guy that definitely still needs some work to do, but I thought he was a good enough run defender with a great frame and exciting testing to where I can buy into, get a little bit more refinement, get a little bit better with your hand usage and disengagement ability. And he could be someone that's really kind of making a great impact off the edge. Obviously, the NFL wasn't buying in too much to that type of pitch. But you know, in round four, I think that's very much worth the swing, and I really like the value here for the Packers. So when it comes to your draft grade on this, Bailey, this is an interesting situation. No first round pick to really kind of put the bow on top of this present. But do you think it's still overall like a pretty good draft?
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice kind of defensive heavy draft. They're definitely like when I think about these teams, I'm like, are they in a better spot before the draft than after? And I mean, for some teams, it's debatable. For the Packers, I think absolutely. Like CJ McClellan, I think are doing a lot of heavy lifting in this class. They should be an instant start for the McClellan. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if there's like 500, 600 snaps for the Packers. So I mean, I gave them a C plus. I mean, I'm not crazy about their day three. Not a lot of steals here, but I mean, they took the guys about the range. I expect them to go in. So, you know what? I'm giving them a B minus. I like CJ McClellan that much. I'll bump it up to a B for them, B minus.
Yeah, I'm giving them a B as well. I don't love the McClellan pick. That probably holds me back. Honestly, if they took someone that I really liked in round three, I probably would be willing to bump this into A territory. But Cisse and Denied Dennis Sutton are guys that I'm really excited about. Jaeger Burton seems like an okay developmental centerpiece. We'll see what happens for him. But I do like Smack. I think he's going to be a good kicker. I had Drew Stevens graded higher personally, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm some expert when it comes to specialist scouting. So if they get a good starting center or starting kicker in this class, along with some of these other potential swings that I think could be very good starters for them, then I'm really excited about it. So I'll give them a B and see what happens for them. Moving forward now to the Houston Texans, and they kind of sent shockwaves to that night one with Keelan Rutledge, offensive lineman out of Georgia Tech. We've heard he's probably going to be starting center for them. I put O-line on the board. We'll see what happens for him. In round two, they also added Caden McDonald, defensive lineman out of Ohio State, and Marlon Klein, tight end from Michigan. Bailey, we'll stop there. We'll talk about round one first. Keelan Rutledge, a guy that, still has some refinement issues, but has a lot of power, is an exciting run blocker. What do you think he can be for the Texans, especially on an offensive line that could certainly use the help?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of guys of the guards rumored to be in round one. You know, you heard some rumors about Basantis, you heard some rumors about Pregnon, you heard some rumors about Rutledge. Ultimately, I do think there's that center versatility for Rutledge. Now, ultimately, push him in the first round, and I think he will be the starting center for the Texans, and then maybe in 2027 they'll kick him back out to guard. But yeah, I mean I think they did a small trade up to grab him, which I don't mind with how many picks the Texans had. They can afford to give a little value to get their guy, and the Texans, a team that consistently seems to be rebuilding their offensive line, has a pretty solid front five right now. I mean that's a pretty good O line, and Kid McDonald. I don't know how the league got let them do this, but just the missing piece on the defensive line, a strong nose tackle who has some juice in rushing the passer, and it's going to be a dominant force up there, going to be able to play on a stack line. Like I as a Titans fan, this pains me seeing him go here because I want him to succeed so bad, and he's gonna eat up our interior offensive line. And Marlon Klein, I mean, the Texans got their two needs. They got Rutledge and McDonald, and there's a couple crazy tight end picks. So I mean, I don't mind this too much, but I don't know. I think the league is going a bit too crazy with these two tight end and three tight end sets where they feel like they need some extra bodies in there, which caused a lot of tight ends to go a little bit higher than I think everybody was expecting during the draft.
Yeah, Cade McDonald is someone that I just think is going to be a phenomenal run stuffer. And when you have two of the most elite pass rushers on the outside, it makes his job a lot easier of just eating space, occupying the middle, and he's going to do that extremely well. So I think that Texans front seven is just even more scary, and it was already terrifying in 2025. Marlon Klein's a guy that I think I was higher on than most. I'm not sure where a lot of people had him, but I mean, he just was such a good mover. He didn't get a lot of receiving opportunity, but I felt like when they were willing to pass his way, he showcased just what he was capable of. I didn't mind this pick. I know it was early. I know it was probably a little bit of a reach. I would have gone with like a guy like Roush first. But overall, I think Marlon Klein's going to be one of the more intriguing day two picks that probably got some more initial lashback from the general audience that is probably going to age a little bit better than what we're seeing on the current just like initial reactions from the masses. So moving forward to day 3, the Texans got busy in round 4 with 2 selections where they got Fabechi Nwewu, the offensive guard out of Oklahoma, and Wade Wood as linebacker from Clemson. Then in round 5, they got Kumar Ramsey, safety out of USC. Then they got wide receiver Lewis Bond out of Boston College in round 6. And in round 7, they grabbed Aiden Fisher, linebacker from Indiana. Bailey, pick one guy from this day 3 haul that stands out to you for this Texans draft class.
No, I'm going to go Kamari Ramsey. I mean, Texans, no stranger to those USC defensive backs with Kalen Bullock and Jalen Smith in there. And Ramsey, I think, is someone who's going to provide solid depth for them. He's kind of, versatile. He can back up a lot of positions. And he plays with a pretty good football IQ where you kind of depend on him if he's thrust into action to not make a mistake, which I think is something you're really looking for out of backups to be deployed in a lot of different ways and also to be dependable on that back end.
Yeah, I like the linebacker depth that they got with both Woodaz and Fisher. I feel like both are instinctual coverage guys that can make plays downfield a little bit, and they can operate all over the field. You trust them in space. Obviously, the Texans have some good linebackers. I like Al-Shaair. I like Toa, not as much. But ultimately, I think these are guys that can step in, potentially make that 53-man roster and contribute to this team moving forward to where they get some added depth and necessary depth on that team's defense. Overall, for your draft grade, Bailey, what are you giving this Texans class?
I'm giving them a B plus. I mean, I can't argue with the picks. I mean, there's a team who saw the needs they needed and they went and they're aggressive in getting that. Like obviously, I didn't have a first round grade, or I think Kellen Roach was like my guard 3 or 4 in this class, so didn't love him in the first round. But I mean, he was the need, and if they liked him, that's fine. Like I understand the pick there, and Ken McDonald's obviously awesome, and just oh boy. But I would have liked to see maybe an edge 3 pick here, maybe another running back in this class, but just some nitpicky stuff that keeps them out of that A range.
Overall, yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat. I'm giving them B. I like Rutledge. I had a round 2 grade on him though, so I think in the first round maybe it's a little early for my liking. I liked McDonald. I thought it was good value. I like Klein, maybe a little early for my liking. I don't know. And then the day 3, I don't see a lot of guys that I think are necessarily going to make like notable impacts. I don't even see like the ceiling for like high end impacts. So it's more just like guys that might be able to contribute more as depth in my evaluation. So I don't know. I'm not like thrilled with the class, but I think it's still not going to be like one that you're looking back on and saying, "Holy cow, this is awful." I just think it's very surface level in terms of just overall ceiling, and that isn't necessarily what I want from draft classes. It's not a bad thing, but I probably would have liked to see more of a swing, especially with their day 3 selections when they had 5 of them. I would like to see them maybe try for the fences, see if they can get someone that can really kind of elevate the team to another level. So we continue in the AFC South, and it's the Indianapolis Colts, who didn't have a first-round pick, but they were able to get C.J. Allen, a guy that was talked about as a potential first-round pick. And then round 3, they got A.J. Halsey, safety from LSU. Bailey, day 2 was an exciting day for the Colts. I mean, C.J. Allen was a guy people weren't really talking about as outside of those first 50 selections, but Chris Ballard and the Colts were more than happy to have him. What do you think about his impact in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, the Colts had 2 pretty big needs at cornerback and safety, and they addressed them both. And I think they got players at really good value. I was pretty surprised to see C.J. Allen available at the Colts pick. I thought he was going to go a bit higher. He's absolutely somebody who could anchor the linebacker position. He's a good athlete. He's good in coverage. He's just the perfect player. And A.J. Halsey, I mean, there's a couple safeties that went ahead of him that I was a bit, surprised by. But, he, is going to fit that kind of Nick Cross role. He's going to be like a 2 high safety, going to play deep. He has some good run defense. He's just like an all-around pretty dependable safety. So I think the Colts nailed it on this day too, especially without a first-round pick.
Yeah, I think C.J. Allen kind of fits exactly what they want. They want that trustworthy, dependable, run-defending linebacker that can, still do a little bit downfield, but overall you want his eyes on the backfield, making plays there. And I think Allen can step in and immediately impact this team that way. Halsey I thought was interesting because I don't necessarily know what the play out is for their safety room, but I'm pretty sure he's like thrust into probably starting right away or competing for starting time with the Nick Cross losing Nick Cross. So I'm intrigued to see if Halsey can be a guy who steps in right away and is starting for this team. I think he's a good enough player. He has like linebacker size, but he's out around the field making splash plays all over. So he's an exciting player. They obviously have two exciting cornerbacks with Ward and Sauce Gardner. So I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen with that secondary and if it can be a strength of the team. Moving forward, though, to day three, in the fourth round, they got Jalen Farmer, offensive guard from Kentucky, and Bryce Betcher, linebacker from Oregon. In round five, they got George Gums Jr., edge rusher out of Florida. In round six, they got Caden Curry, edge rusher out of Ohio State. And then in the seventh round, they got Seth McGowan, running back from Kentucky, and Deion Burks, wide receiver from Oklahoma. Bailey, one guy from the State 3 Hall. Who are you picking?
I like Deion Burks. He's somebody who I had pegged as a top 100 pick, and I think he fell due to a back injury. I'm not 100% certain on that, but he's someone who I think could be a wide receiver for them. He offers value on all three levels. He's fast. He's a pretty decent route runner, and the Colts kind of wide receiver depth is something I feel like is an underrated need for them. He's kind of bit them in the ass a couple times during the season, so he's someone who I think can compete for that fringe starting role, which is exactly what you want out of a seventh round pick. He's someone who I think is absolutely going to outplay the draft slot if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is George Gums Jr., the edge rusher out of Florida. This is a guy that walked on at Northern Illinois in 2021 as a wide receiver. Eventually, year after year, worked his way to the edge rushing role where he was able to make an impact at Florida. Is now 6'4", 245 pounds. Turned in excellent testing at his pro day. He's a guy that I really think has some exciting upside. The low experience at edge is something that I'm kind of intrigued by. He had 18 pressures this season. Something that needs to be developed on, but I feel like there was enough flash there, enough moment to like buy into what he can become to where, continued experience playing in the trenches, continued added strength to his frame. He can be a guy that maybe works his way up into being that like flashy edge rusher that the Colts have kind of lacked at the defensive end spot, especially in the Ballard era. So overall, what is your draft grade for the Indianapolis Colts, Bailey?
I give him an A minus. I really like this Colts draft. I think what I'd like to see Edge hit a bit earlier, but I mean, they got a good like floor guy in Curry and a good development guy in Gums. But uh, I mean, Allen and Halsey are really the kind of the defining moments of this draft. And even though they are at lower value position, I think some of the guys they took in day three have some good upside as well. It's just a pretty typical Colts draft where they get the athletes and but this time they managed to address some nice floor players as well.
Yeah, I'll give it an A minus as well. I'm not even necessarily as high on CJ Allen, but I think this is a very good draft, and I think the value in which they got Allen is right around where I had him, and I think he fits that Colts scheme extremely well. I think Betcher also made a lot of sense for Indianapolis. I really like the Gums and Curry selections to try to add depth to the defensive end room. And Halsey's a guy that I think can step in and start right away, which is great value out of that third round. So this is an intriguing class, and with limited capital, they really had to find ways to get lucky and get creative with how they assessed the roster and how they added impact players, and it worked out for them. So yeah, I'll give them the credit for that, and I'll give them an A minus for this class. Now we go to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this has probably been the class that's been talked about the most. James Gladstone already under fire, but he started out in round two getting Nate Borkature, tight end out of Texas A&M, and then on round three followed it up with Albert Regis, defensive lineman from Texas A&M, Emmanuel Pregnon, offensive guard out of Oregon, and Jalen Husky, the defensive back from Maryland. Bailey, there's already been so much hate thrown towards the Jaguars. Are you the saving grace for Duval Nation as the one lone supporter of this class in Day 2 Hall, or are you joining the masses?
No, I won't spoil it for now, but let's start out with this day two, and just remember, I was very generous for the Colts and Texans, so I'm not hating just because they're a rival. But the Borkature pick, I think, is something that took everyone by shock. I don't think anybody really anticipated the Jaguars taking a backup tight end with their first pick in the second round. This tight end class was always going to be a bit muddled behind Stowers and Sadiq, and all these guys are so close that this could have been any tight end really. But yeah, I didn't watch this guy, so I'm not going to be like, oh, he's so low on the consensus board, because like there are guys who are lower on the consensus board that I love, which we'll see later in the video when we get some of the other teams. So I mean, this is just I think this is more of an interesting pick than anything. I'm definitely going to go watch the tape on this guy, because I mean I have heard of him, but I didn't watch him play. And then Albert Regis is somebody who I did watch, and I had like a 7th round grade on him. after they traded Mason Smith, you need another nose tackle. So go ahead, dude, go draft one. But then they drafted like an undersized nose tackle who, has good athletic ability, but his play on the field wasn't that impressive to me. And kind of taking developmental nose tackle with your second pick, okay, that's fine. And then Emmanuel Pregnon was, a steal, looking at the consensus board, and someone who I think fell a bit again, like I mentioned with Rutledge, somebody who was considered in round one, but fell to round three. I think this is their best value pick that they got. And then Jalen Husky was a guy when I watched, this is a guy I had a UDFA grade on, and then he was draftable, and the Jags just take him in the third round. So I don't know, a bit of a, kind of a seesaw where, reach, steal, reach. So a very unpredictable draft for the Jaguars, at least in day two.
Yeah, so I didn't watch Nate Berkshire before the draft, but then I went and watched after the Jaguars selected him. I wanted to see. I didn't want to just come on here and be like, "What Berkshire? I'm going to do this" if I didn't have any familiarity with him. And honestly, like I understand, similar reasons why I buy into Sam Roush. It's like, are they big enough? Can they block? Can they play in line? Can they make an impact in the receiving game? Can they win from multiple ways? Berkshire can do all that. So like there is understanding. He'd probably be more in like the Marlon Klein tier for me, to where he would have been like that round 4, round 5 batch of guys that just could have gone in any order, and I wouldn't have been too shocked about it. To where like I can excuse it. That initial shock on draft day for sure, but I'm not as against it. Then round 3 rolls around, and Jesus, dude, I don't even know what to say. Like Albert Regis, I think of like Chris Jenkins for the Bengals, and he was a guy that was like undersized but really good against the run. Didn't have a lot of pass rush upside, but he was athletic, so like you could buy into that, and he's already good against the run, so he can become more. Albert Regis was like a poor man's Chris Jenkins, and Chris Jenkins hasn't really done anything in the NFL. To where I look at Albert Regis and I just think like, what is the appeal here? I don't think he's gonna have like an impact in the NFL to where it's like anything worthwhile. And in the second round or early third, I guess it's egregious. Emmanuel Pregnon, like you said, probably good value. Like I think he's a solid guard, and I think he can start for this team either right away or maybe like in a year. Still the development needed, but I think Pregnon has like the natural play strength, the natural size and athleticism and pop at the point of attack that you're going to like on the offensive line. And really, it's easy to kind of get refinement out of that. The natural traits that he brings to the table is what's exciting. Jalen Husky, I just didn't like him. I think the versatility is exciting. He's a former cornerback that moved to safety, so the ball production's always been there in his career. So it's something that you can buy into as like, this guy's going to go and be a ball hunter and make plays and get the opposing offense off the field, and that's how you win the long-term outlook of the game, is winning the turnover battle. What I really want to talk about, though, is the fourth round, where they went and grabbed Wesley Williams, who I did not think had like any redeeming quality. And I don't mean this as offense to Wesley Williams. I'm sure he's a big fan of the channel, but I just thought that he was 7th round UDFA grade, a guy that when I'm like talking about his upside, it's like, he like plays with nice leverage. He has a nice motor, but like his overall just like hands, his lack of length, his underwhelming testing, just overall burst off the edge. I felt like he didn't pursue the football very well. I honestly liked Vincent Anthony Jr. more, and he went undrafted. So I don't know. It's a weird situation, and I'm not acting like I'm just some like scouting messiah who can't be wrong. But I just thought like the overall assessment that I had on Williams and the overall assessment I've seen on Williams from other people that I trust when it comes to their evaluations, compared to how early the Jags took him and Husky and Regis, just seems a little egregious to me, to where I understand why James Gladstone is getting so much heat for this draft class. Bailey, I don't want to talk too much about day 3, though, so let's keep moving. Tanner Koziel round 5 for tight end out of Houston. In round 6, they got Josh Cameron, wide receiver from Baylor. CJ Williams, wide receiver from Stanford, as well in the 6th. Then in the 7th round, they added Zach Durfee, edge rusher out of Washington, and Parker Hughes, linebacker out of Middle Tennessee. Bailey, what are your thoughts on this draft? And does Gladstone redeem himself with some of these other selections?
No, no. I like Josh Cameron. I don't like Josh Cameron, but I think he's an intriguing guy. He has a weird build for a wide receiver. He's so strong and stout, and he's someone who uses that strength to his advantage. Just pure strength. He's going to outmuscle the guy and outwork him, throw him the ball, throw it up to him, and watch him just attack the corners. So he's an interesting body in there. But I just want to make no. I'll actually talk about this later. But yeah, Josh Cameron's kind of my favorite pick here, but I'm not exactly sure how he fits in a traditional wide receiver room.
Yeah, so the guy I want to talk about for this haul is probably Zach Durfee. I think he's an exciting pass rusher, and he was injured for a lot of his career, so it's kind of hard to get like a full read on him. But he turned in a pretty solid season this year with I think 74 total pressures, 10 sacks. He was very exciting when it came to just his overall production and just ability to create impact off the edge. He's got a nice frame, 6'5", 247 pounds. I think if the Jaguars found an impact player on the edge in this class, it's definitely Durfee for me. I think he can really kind of be one of those exciting, intriguing pass rushing upside guys. And honestly, if you swapped Williams and Durfee, I'd probably be able to defend this class. But when it comes to grade Bailey, I'll jump on it. I'm going to give them a D minus. I like Pregnon enough. I like Forfeiture from the limited amount that I got to scout him before we made this podcast, and I like Durfee. I'm probably being too nice going D minus and saving them from the F, but that's where I'm at right now. D minus for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I need to see what class would you give an F on. I don't think we've seen an F from you yet, unless you gave one last year that I wasn't aware of. Yeah, this is an F. This is just arrogance. And when Michael, I don't want to speak for Michael, I think you'd agree with this. When we are grading these guys and grading these drafts, we're not saying, oh, they got such a steal because they got the 30th overall player at 70, or they took the 70th overall player at 30. What a reach. We watch most of these guys. We're given our opinion based on our tape. We don't know the character. We don't have the full medicals. This is just our opinion based on what we saw on the tape. And, they took so many 7th round UDFA guys at premium picks. They have 4 top 100 picks. I don't know if they took a starter here. I don't know if there's a single starter out of the guys they took here. And how arrogant are you after that playoff run you had where, you kind of lost to a team that you probably should have beat in the Chargers? And is your team better after this draft? I don't think so. I don't think this team is notably better. Pregnon's probably the guy with the highest upside to start here. And I don't think he's even going to start year one. So, if a depth guard is your best pick, something has gone very, very wrong. And, when you compound this with last year's draft where you trade that premium capital for Travis Hunter and now he's going to be, they're kind of focusing on cornerback. That whole story was overblown. Sorry to get sidetracked. I still think he's going to rotate in a wide receiver, but I don't think it's the split that they initially envisioned with him. So now you've taken pretty much a pure corner at 3rd overall and give up a first to get him. So it's a very, very premium price. And I don't know. The Jaguars made some solid steps this year. And with Gladstone and Cohen, I think they're going to be good enough where this draft won't affect them too much this year. But I don't know. In the next couple of years, we could all see it come crashing down for them.
Absolutely. So moving forward now, after we just would not let up on the Jaguars, we are here with the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that got active on night one. They traded up to go and get Mansour Delane, cornerback out of LSU, an exciting addition. And then they also traded into that first round, as we know, with the Trent McDuffie trade, to where they were able to get Peter Woods at the back end of the first. And then, we'll stick with day one for now. 2 very impact players, 2 guys that, in January, if I told you, hey, the Chiefs got Delane and Woods, you'd probably scream into your pillow because you're like, how did they get away with it? Woods has fallen a little bit. There's been some legitimate questions about his athleticism, the size that he came in at as a pro day, especially when, he wasn't testing and he didn't even test in the limited amount they did as well as you'd expect. The production of the season was a little questionable, but Delane and Woods is still very scary for Kansas City, especially when you think about back to January where they were viewed at. Bailey, what are your thoughts on this first day haul for Kansas City?
Yeah, after the Jermon McCoy injury, which I'm sure we'll get to pretty soon here, Delane was a clear corner one in this class. And, the Chiefs make a jump to get them. And the Chiefs have a pretty good track record at taking corners. So you got to kind of trust their evaluation at this point. They think Delane is going to be a guy who's worth the trade up and taken at 6th overall. Then you got to give it to them. And, he's so athletic. And, any shortcomings he does have right now, I think are going to be smoothed out. And this is going to be a guy I think we're going to be talking about as a top 10 corner in the very soon future. And Peter Woods is someone who I loved coming to this class. Didn't test the way I kind of expected him to, but they've been looking for that guy next to for Chris Jones for a while. And last year they took Norman Laud, who got injured. He didn't play that well. So I think Woods is going to be their next guy that they try out there. And I think Woods is a good bit better than Norman Laud. So I'm excited for this pick, and I'm excited to see those two next to each other. And, I think the Chiefs nailed it on this day one.
Yeah, very exciting haul. Then they followed up with a round two selection of R. Mason Thomas, sort of a designated pass rushing specialist. Bailey, I know you're a fan of him though. What do you think his impact can be for the Chiefs defense heading into 2026?
Yeah, this is not the body type they usually go for. Like we were talking about with the Bengals and Cassius Howell, they're adding some new bodies, so teams going against their tendencies a little bit here. And R. Mason Thomas is obviously a speedier, kind of bendier edge rusher than the Chiefs usually like. They usually like their power guys a little bit more. So I mean, this is going to be an interesting body that they add to their edge room. I'm always in favor of adding guys with unique skill sets and allow you to deploy some unique looks against the Chiefs. And there's such a heavy blitzing team, and Thomas with his bend and speed is going to fit in right um, perfectly with them as he works on his run defense a little bit.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy that I think it changes what we know about the Chiefs because they haven't really operated with a guy that's just specifically like sort of pass rushing specialist like our Mason Thomas is. I'm lower on Thomas when it came to my evaluation. The testing was a little underwhelming. I felt like he got the benefit of just the overall gravity of the impact that Oklahoma defensive line had. But I mean, it's not like Kansas City doesn't have that. Chris Jones is going to demand a lot of attention. George Karlaftis and now Peter Woods are going to demand attention. So there's exciting pieces to this defense to where a guy like our Mason Thomas can continue to capitalize on one-on-one situations and opportunities to where maybe he can continue to produce at the NFL level. So moving forward to day three, they started off with Jaden Kennedy, cornerback out of Oregon. And then in round five, they got Emmett Johnson, running back from Nebraska, and Cyrus Allen, wide receiver out of Cincinnati. And then they didn't have a sixth round pick, but made some headlines with their round seven selection of Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback out of LSU, a guy that fell down the board a little bit compared to where people expected him to be drafted. Bailey, if there's one guy from this day three haul that you're going to talk about, is it Nussmeier? Are you going somewhere else? What are you thinking?
I'll do Canada. I really liked him when I watched him. He's kind of like scrappy, undersized corner. He fits that archetype. I feel like I've been talking about a lot of that archetype in those drafts. But I mean, those are the guys who tend to fall in the draft and outproduce their draft slot by a good amount. And I expect Canada to compete for that nickel job in the Chiefs' room this season. I'm wouldn't be surprised if he ends up starting for them. So I mean, the Chiefs, they go with kind of two of the smaller corners, but two of the more talented corners in this draft, if you ask me.
Yeah, I got poached from Ole Miss, very talented slot defender. But I'll talk about Nussmeier. I do think that there is some intrigue here, and even if he is just the long-term quarterback too in Kansas City, I think there is value in sitting behind Patrick Mahomes, learning from Andy Reid for 3, 4 seasons, and then hitting that free agency market when you've kind of gotten healthy, gotten more experience, gotten more expertise under your belt, developed a little bit, getting to study and practice alongside one of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL. There's going to be a market for Nussmeier if he plays his cards right, especially if he gets some spot starts along the way to where he can, prove to be efficient enough in that offense to where someone can say, ah, man, this guy's so good. He just needs a full time job, and we're going to pay him the big contract to let him prove he can be that. He'll get a bridge QB opportunity. And, sometimes all you need in this league is an opportunity, maybe a little bit further down the road than he was hoping for. But I don't think the story of Garrett Nussmeier is done just yet, as long as he's able to take advantage of the opportunities that will be presented to him in the future. But yeah, overall grade, Bailey. What are you thinking for this Kansas City draft?
So I just want to talk about Nussmeier a little bit more. Do you think out of all the QBs taken in this draft, he has the best shot at starting week one? I saw somebody ask that. I was wondering your thoughts on that.
I guess it's just a situation of Patrick Mahomes maybe not being cleared. I guess.
Yeah, it's like if he's still kind of lingering injuries, and you know that the Raiders aren't like super excited about starting Mendoza week one. They don't think he's ready.
Yeah,
And Ty Simpson isn't going to start. Carson Beck might win his job, but unlikely. Cole Payton isn't going to start over Hurts, obviously.
yeah.
Maybe
It's
Drew Aller for the Steelers. I don't
I would
know.
say probably Beck has the best chance. It obviously depends on what the playout is with this Brissett situation, and more likely than not, Brissett is going to make an agreement and become the 2 year starter in Arizona or whatever, be paid for 2 years, even if he's only 1 year guy. But I mean, Nussmeier has that opportunity. I just think Mahomes will probably be back from what we've heard, and then they'll probably just roll with Fields if Mahomes isn't back yet. Probably for the better when it comes to Nussmeier. You don't want to necessarily rush him in just because like there was like hype of him being a top QB. I don't think it was ever necessarily justified. So yeah, I'd say probably Carson Beck, maybe Klubnik, but I don't know. Nussmeier is definitely a lot higher than where he came off the draft board. So that speaks volumes for just where he's at as a prospect in terms of permanent readiness and growing up around an NFL OC of a dad.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you give me Nussmeier versus Fields in a genuine open competition, I'm probably taking Nussmeier at this point in both of their
Could be
careers.
could be interesting. So for draft grade for me, I'm probably going to go with an A. I really like Monsieur Delane and Peter Woods, and I think I like the aggressive approach from Kansas City. I always like their drafts. I think they're a team that seems to really kind of go for it and swing on the upside. And I like Kennedy. You talked about him, but I think this is a guy that has just been a proven dominant slot corner at two dominant college programs, to where I trust he can make that transition to the NFL. And if you're getting that on day three with two guys that I think can be impact players in round one, I think that's a really good draft. So I'll probably give it an A, maybe a little bit lower, A minus, B plus type of range, but I think this is a good job by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I give him an A. And if we can include UDFA, it might be an A plus because they grabbed some demons in the UDFA portion, like Jeff Caldwell and John Michael Gillenborg and like Jaden Ott. They went crazy. But the only critique I think I would have was not an earlier wide receiver. But I mean, when they're on their board, when they were on the clock, I don't think there's any wide receiver I would have wanted them to take anyways. Maybe Omar Cooper over Peter Woods, but I mean, that's just a little too nitpicky for my taste. So I mean, I think they hit all their needs and they got talented players, and they're taking that defense to the next level with different guys like R. Mason Thomas and Peter Woods than they normally draft. So I think this is gonna be an evolution of the Chiefs, and we're gonna see a way different team than we've seen in years past.
Moving forward to the Las Vegas Raiders on definitely the same day, we're going with the first round, Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana, the obvious pick here, and a quarterback that, really kind of established himself as the top pick in January, probably a little earlier even. The Raiders obviously eventually found out that they were going to be the team picking number one, and that's when things sort of set in stone as what was going to happen here. But Bailey, what are your thoughts on this pick? And do you think Mendoza can be the quarterback that really kind of ignites a new era of Raiders football and takes them to new levels?
Yeah, I do think he can be, and I mean, we're both obviously fans of Mendoza and the Raiders draft. That's why we both wore gray on the second day we're doing these draft grades. But I think with Mendoza, I think expectations have to be tempered, especially with his year one outlook, where I'm not sure how many games he's really going to start. They have Kirk Cousins there, and Clint Kubiak has said many times that he wants to sit Mendoza. So you have to be patient with this pick. He's not going to come out swinging on the gates and be dominant. At least I don't think. Or maybe this is all just some big like ploy to be like, I know Mendoza's starting all 17 games. He's going to be like a Pro Bowler. But I do think he's a little bit more raw than people want to give him credit for. But I do think he's a franchise QB level prospect, and the Raiders made the right decision taking him at one.
Easy saying that he's not going to play. Charles Davis may be watching this thing and have some words for you. But moving forward to day two, they select Traden Stukes, the slot corner slash safety out of Arizona. And then in the third round, they get Kieron Crawford, edge rusher out of Auburn, and Trey Zune, offensive lineman from Texas A&M. Bailey, these are some guys that I think can really kind of plug into this lineup and add some instant impact. I think Trey Zune is someone that will be able to work around somewhere in that offensive line and potentially find a starting role on day one. Traden Stukes is a guy I talked about as probably my top slot corner, but also would have really competed for my top free safety spot. I think the Edelman would have just barely edged him out. But overall, I mean, Traden Stukes is just such an exciting player and a guy that I think offers extremely impressive range, to where if he's starting in that free safety spot or rotating and playing down in that slot area, I mean, there's ways he can contribute in a multitude of ways to where he's going to impact this defense. And Kieron Crawford was a guy that I feel like kind of snuck up boards as a sleeper edge rusher guy that ended up going in probably the right place for him in terms of his talent and value on tape. So it's exciting to see him added to an edge rushing room that, it seems like Crosby's sticking around. Malcolm Kuntz is good. Getting another piece in that mix, I think, will make this unit very exciting.
Yeah, this was a very interesting day two haul in terms of what positions they decided to address. Stukes is obviously like a really good safety, and the Raiders traded down, and that was the right decision if they wanted to take Stukes. I probably would have liked to see maybe a wide receiver or defensive tackle there, but Stukes is a good player. He'll play a lot from year one. A little bit older, it's kind of like why wasn't this guy popping off before? Like he's like a fifth year or 6 year senior, and now he suddenly decides to be really good. There's always questions when it comes to guys like that, but I mean, he's so good, versatile, so athletic. He'll play a lot of snaps for them. Kieran Crawford, yeah, somebody like you said, flying up draft boards. His energy next to Max Crosby is going to be fun to watch when they go out when they are lined up across from each other. But I don't know here. Again, this is like an edge 3 and edge 4 guy for them. I'm not really sure this was a really high priority need. And then Trey Zune, a guy who was projected to move inside, projected to be a guard. I mean, sorry, center, but they signed Tyler Linderbaum. So it's like, I guess you don't really need a center. So I put him at O line because I genuinely have no idea where he's going to play. He might be kind of like a super utility backup where he's backing up all three of the interior spots. Maybe they'll try him out a tackle. I'm not sure. But I like the players they took, but I'm not sure from a need standpoint they really addressed what I would have liked to see them do.
I got you. So moving forward to the day three selections, and the Raiders continue to be active. In the fourth round, they added Jermod McCoy, cornerback out of Tennessee, a guy people talked about as a potential first rounder, if not for the medicals. Mike Washington Jr., running back out of Arkansas. Dalton Johnson, safety out of Arizona. Hezekiah Masses, cornerback from California. Malik Benson, wide receiver out of Oregon. And Brandon Cleveland, defensive lineman from North Carolina State. Bailey, there's a lot of intriguing pieces on this day three batch of picks. Which guy do you want to talk about most?
I want to talk about Mike Washington because he was someone who was, after the combine, he was kind of, um, in day two talks, but the production was never there for him. And I think that kind of scared teams away. So he falls to round four, and the Raiders kind of snapped two fallen guys in McCoy and Mike Washington. And Washington, I think, ends up at a pretty good spot for him, somewhere where he can kind of back up Ashton Genty and the body in that running back room is obviously like bigger than Genty. Has that straight line speed where Genty's a little bit more shifty. So it's a good compliment to him. And I think these two are going to be a pretty decent running back duo.
Yeah, I think that final year of production was obviously good enough, but yeah, just the career production a little concerning, I guess. But I think the obvious guy to talk about here is Jermod McCoy. Sometimes you just have a player fall into your lap and you just don't overthink it. On that day three selection, it seemed like a lot of insiders are saying, look, on day three, the contract's not as guaranteed and he can easily be let go of if, the injury is too bad and he can never really recover the player that he is. I think McCoy's a stud. We don't really look at the medicals because we're not doctors, so we don't get a lot of insight in that regard. But I mean, it's worth the risk 100 times out of 100 to see if a player that is, top 10 caliber is worth taking the swing on in the fourth round and seeing if you can kind of make do with his injuries. We've seen a lot of players fall because of injuries and then they end up not even really impacting their pro career. Guys like Trey Smith and there was someone else I had. Miles Jack was another one. Where it's just like these guys slip down the board, and then it's just these moments where it's like you know, you can never really discount the injuries, and then they play in the NFL and they're just like studs, and it's like okay, so we just should have discounted the injuries. So in the fourth round, I feel like it's almost zero risk. Obviously you'd like to hit on your fourth round picks, but there's going to be so many fourth round misses that taking a swing on a guy with the potential impact that McCoy can bring is so much worth it to where the Raiders just absolutely nailed this draft. And that's why I'm giving them an A plus when it comes to this draft. I think, yeah, maybe they didn't hit like their biggest needs as much as you would have liked. But overall, I mean, when the board plays out that you have great players available, you take them. And I don't think the Raiders ever passed on taking a very good player at the draft slot. Some of the top guys on my board, some of the most impactful players that I felt like were available in each round, the Raiders seem to be scooping up. I love the draft, and I think this is the type of draft that can really reset a franchise and send them in the right direction.
Yeah, I was a bit harsh on them. I ended up giving them a B. I'm not going to give them credit for Mendoza. I feel like my draft grades are more based on their approach and the players they took and like how good they kind of managed their assets and the spot they were at. Like Mendoza was going to be the first round pick. It was them or the Jets. Like I'm not giving them credit for that. Anybody would have taken Mendoza number one. And McCoy, I do like that trade up. I like that they traded up to get him in the top of the fourth, where there's no guaranteed money, so they can kind of take a risk on him. But just from a needs perspective, I really just like this draft. I thought obviously besides QB, the biggest needs were at wide receiver and defensive tackle. And then they take Malik Benson, who's somebody who I really like Malik Benson, who's in my sleeper video, but I'm not really sure what he's adding to that wide receiver room. They already kind of have that archetype of the deep field stretcher and a couple of their players there. So like I'm not sure what he's adding there. And Brendan Cleveland, he's like fine, but I would like to see a more like intriguing name. There's somebody you can maybe rely on for some more snaps as a rookie. So just from like a needs approach, I'm not loving this draft from a player's standpoint. I mean, they got two of my sleepers and they got like my cornerback one, Jermon McCoy. So it's tough to balance stuff like that. So I'm going to end up with a B just because of, it's an A for the players they took, but it's like a C for the needs they address. So it averages out to a B.
I don't know. I think when you're a team like the Raiders, it's fine to go with get players that are going to change the organization more than just focusing on your biggest needs because the players that they got, I think, were way too impactful to give them a B. That's crazy.
I mean,
Moving forward,
hold on.
moving
Let me
forward,
defend
moving
myself.
forward to
Let
the
me
Los
defend
Angeles
myself. All
Chargers.
right.
Moving forward,
I was just gonna
go
say
ahead.
that obviously, like you can see that teams will address uh players and holes in the future. Like the Browns and with the 2025 draft, they didn't address really any O line needs or any wide receiver needs, and then they go to this draft and they address them. So teams can do that in the future, and that's fine from a team building perspective. But in terms of what the Raiders need this year, it was a bad draft. I'm kind of grading this draft in a vacuum because I don't know what they're going to do in the future. I don't know what free agents are going to sign. When I look at this draft and what they needed before this draft, when they needed after the draft, the needle isn't really moved for me. So that's why I'm lower on it.
Now moving forward to the Los Angeles Chargers, and they start off the night by selecting Akeem Mesidor, the older but very talented edge rusher from Miami, Florida. And then in the second round, they get Jake Slaughter, center out of Florida. Bailey, these first two picks, we'll talk about the first one, Mesidor. Obviously, losing Owe was huge for the Chargers, and they need to find a way to replace him. Maybe Mesidor is not a one-for-one match in replacing what Owe brought to the table, but he is a very technically refined and talented player. Here at 22, what'd you make of the pick?
Yeah, I mean, I love this pick. I think Mesidor is so experienced. He's so you know, well rounded. What he can do is really hard to poke holes in his game. His variety of pass rush moves. He's so good against the run. He can drop back if you need him. He can kick inside if you need him. Just the complete package. And the only things going against Mesidor are the age and the injuries. And if you remove those two things, I think this is like a top 10 pick, top 5 pick. So it's really hard for me to criticize the Chargers for taking somebody like this. Like you said, they have a need at edge, and Khalil Mack has continued to age, and Mesidor kind of fits in perfectly as an edge two next to Tully, and that's going to be a very exciting edge duo for years to come.
Completely agree. So now moving forward to that round two selection, they get Jake Slaughter, a team that was very much in the market for finding improvements on the offensive line. They announced him as a guard. Pretty interesting. I don't know if that's necessarily the exact position he'll play or if they just didn't want Beatas feeling like Jake Slaughter is now in an instant competition with him. Who knows? But ultimately, the Chargers continue to bolster the offensive line. What do you feel of the Slaughter selection here in round two?
Yeah, so I mean, I put Slaughter as a center, but like you said, they announced him as a guard, and I thought Slaughter was like a pure center. Like that, this guy's light. Like this guy, I think he's like 303, 304 at the combine in his pro day. He was definitely playing under 300 at times for Florida. So if they plan on moving him to the guard, that's going to be, kind of questionable. And like you said, they have Tyler Biadasz, and like I think their right guard right now is Cole Strange. So like you have pretty much three centers on your roster on your interior offensive line if things work out that way. So I mean, I didn't love it, but they were kind of in a guard I don't know, like gap, I guess you can call it, because Besantis went and Rutledge went. Then the next guard that went was like Pregnon, maybe. Depends on what some teams are planning on doing with their offensive tackles. But I think they were kind of like, we really need a guard. And I do think they were the team trying to jump the Ravens for Ione. So it's a tough spot for the Chargers who like kind of understood they needed a guard, and they're like, we'll just take the best guy and maybe we can convert him to the guard. So it's hard to like criticize the Chargers for recognizing how bad their interior line is and trying to address it, but I just don't think Slaughter was the right pick here.
So moving forward to day three, they got active in the fourth round where they got Brennan Thompson, wide receiver from Mississippi State, Travis Burke, offensive tackle from Memphis, and Genesis Smith, safety from Arizona. Then they followed it up with the fifth round selection of Nick Barrett, nose tackle from South Carolina. And then in round six, they added Logan Taylor and Alex Harkey, offensive linemen from Boston College and Oregon, respectively. So, Bailey, this day three haul, they had six different selections. Do you think any of these picks kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, I really like Travis Burke. A guy who's versatile. He's going to be their swing tackle. I don't think there's a lot of competition back there, and he's going to be somebody who, back to the left tackle and right tackle spots. And the Chargers are no stranger to time to tackle injuries with Alton Slater, and when they've tried to put guys into that role, it's been really really bad. So, yeah, I think Burke will do a good job backing up both of those roles, and he can start if necessary. Like someone gets injured or knocked out for a game or two, I think he provides a nice solid floor as a backup option.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Brennan Thompson just because I feel like he's such an important piece to Mike McDaniel's offense. We saw video, or maybe you haven't, but on the Chargers TikTok, he was like asking on day three. He said, if you're able to get Brennan Thompson, like I'll take my shirt off or some weird Mike McDaniel quirky energy, whatever. But ultimately, I think having that deep threat in that offense is something that Steph's really needed, just because we know what Justin Herbert is. He's a QB that can really kind of put the ball on the money, but he's someone that loves to, fire away downfield. Guys like Trey Harris and Lad McConkey, I think, are better in that 10 to 15 yard range. You have some other pieces below, like Rondé Gadsden's kind of like pushing the seam type tight end. But you really want that deep threat that can threaten the defense downfield and open things up underneath. And I think that's what a guy like Brennan Thompson can be if he's able to develop and further his game. And I think, there are flashes at Mississippi State to where you can buy into him making that instant impact. But I think he's a guy that really kind of steps in as more of a rotational piece for this receiving room and provides some splash plays and takes the top off of defense to open up opportunities underneath for their better receivers. So when it comes to draft grades, Bailey, what are your thoughts on this Chargers haul?
I think I'm gonna end up with like a C minus on them. I think they kind of fumbled here. I like Mesidor pick, and I think Slaughter's a good player, but they took such a like misfit of interior guards here, like Logan Taylor and Alex Harker, who they're moving into guard, and like their interior line is gonna be so bad. And these are not guys who are I don't think are gonna like win jobs out of camp. So you're kind of rolling with what you got. So I think it's gonna be pretty bad for them. And I would have liked to see maybe take a defensive tackle too if I was picking somebody with a little bit more pass rush juice than Nick Barrett, like Grayson Halden, Zane Durant, Landon Robinson, Jordan Vanderberg, somebody who, it's just a little bit more upside and can rush from the interior. So I don't know. 4 O-line picks and 0 starters is always going to be rough.
I can totally understand that. I gave them B just because I do think Mesidor's good. I think Slaughter can be a long term answer at center. And I think guys like Thompson and Burke serve a nice role of like swing tackle depth and, adding that splash play at receiver. Genesis Smith, I think, has the upside to be a good safety. So I like that selection. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't like blown away with this draft haul overall. I thought it was like just solid. So yeah, I just round them out at a nice B. Moving forward now to the other team in Los Angeles, and that is the Rams, who kind of sent shockwaves through the league by selecting Ty Simpson in the first round. Then they followed it up on day 2 with selections of Max Clare, tight end out of Ohio State, and Keegan Tross, offensive lineman from Missouri. Bailey, we'll start with that round 1 selection of Ty Simpson. Do you think Simpson can be the future quarterback for the Rams, and do you think he's going to succeed in that role?
Yeah, I mean, to both of your questions, yes, I do think he's going to be the future, and I can see him succeeding. If McVay likes a QB this high and he takes him, I have pretty big confidence in them. Not even from like a QB like development standpoint, just from a I know who can execute my offense type standpoint. I think his track record with that is pretty solid. And this pick has been really analyzed to death, so I don't want to go too much into it. But just from like a approach of we're never going to pick this high again as long as Matthew Stafford's our quarterback, and when he retires, we don't want to be left with like nothing in the QB room. And you can go take like a Cole Payton or a Carson Beck in the later rounds, but I mean, none of them have the upside that Ty Simpson has. If they evaluated the roster and been like, you know what, we got our cornerbacks, we don't really have another hole in this roster. We're good with taking Ty Simpson, and we still think we have a championship roster. And if Matt Stafford decides to retire next year, then we can continue kind of the dynasty going. So I like to pick from that approach.
Yeah, it seems like there's been speculation that McVay didn't love the pick, but I think McVay signed off on it. I think there
Yeah.
wouldn't have been a selection of a QB if Snead and McVay hadn't kind of talked through it and figured out if this guy was a true fit for the offense. Simpson's a 1 year starter. I think there's real question about that. And, the projection to the NFL is always difficult when you only get 1 year play, but he has the opportunity to sit behind Stafford. He's a really nice processor for especially a 1 year guy. So I'm excited about him. I think he fits that McVay offense well, even if like the ceiling of what he can be in that McVay offense or just as a quarterback in general is still questioned. But overall, I think he's a good QB, so I think it's worth the selection. Moving forward to those day 2 picks of Claire and Trost, I'm a little confused on them. I thought Claire was solid, but I don't know if they need to continue going at the tight end room. I felt like, Parkinson and Ferguson are guys that are going to be on the field enough to where you can find that third tight end elsewhere, at least with less capital spent on the position, especially with how the board fell out. I feel like there were available options kind of later in this draft where they could easily, trade it back from that third rounder or, trade up a little bit from that 6th or maybe even gotten a guy in the 6th and it would have been perfectly fine. So I didn't love the selection, even though I do like Max Clare. And then Keegan Tross, I didn't view in this regard. I thought he was a guy that was more of like a late day 3 selection. I thought he had like some intriguing upside on the offensive line, but I project him more as a guard. And I guess he's just going to be a guy that probably is like playing as depth in that rotation of guys behind like Dotson and stuff to see if he can like step in that regard. But I don't know. I viewed him as like a fifth, sixth round grade. I thought he had like a nice build and he kind of fits that like mold of what the Rams look for in guards. But I wasn't a huge fan of like his speed or his overall leverage. So definitely some technical work that's needed on his side.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they use Claire because he's kind of like a do-it-all tight end. I can kind of see him be deployed and backing up all the roles. He might play like more like a super utility tight end role than necessarily a starter. Like you need him as your inline guy, you need him as your move guy, you want him on as like your third tight end and 1-3 looks. Like I think he's gonna provide that. So I mean, they're just addicted to taking tight ends, and I'm just like we're going through these draft and the amount of backup like centers and backup tight ends in the second round really show how teams kind of saw this draft where they're like, we don't really care about, need or positional value. We're just going to get the guys that we like. Just like there's nobody else we would take. I think there was a big kind of hole in how teams saw this draft, or a big gap in how teams saw this draft in terms of the players they like and the needs they like. And moving on to Keegan Trost, he's someone I thought was actually pretty intriguing to land on the Rams. 7th year senior, super experienced at the left tackle and right tackle spot. I mean, I know you have him projected to guard, Michael, but he might get a shot at tackle. I mean, the Rams don't really care about arm length, or they haven't really cared about arm length at other tackles in the past. So I can see him getting a shot there and kind of being a super utility backup where he's backing up both the tackle spots and getting some work in at guard too to kind of be a full four-line or four-position backup there for them.
Could be intriguing. So moving forward to day three, they didn't have a fourth or fifth round pick, but in the sixth round they added C.J. Daniels, wide receiver from Miami, and in the seventh round they added Tim Keenan, defensive lineman from Alabama. Bailey, the guy I want to talk about is Tim Keenan. He is a smaller but very burly and exciting nose tackle prospect that I think could really kind of plug into this defense, maybe provide some additional run support on that interior. He's a guy that honestly provides some juice, which I think a lot of nose tackles kind of lack. He has some explosiveness to cover multiple lanes. He's exciting. He holds ground well. He can eat blocks and take on double teams decently. So he's a guy that I think is a good value here in round seven, and maybe a guy that can produce as a long term answer on this defensive line, and maybe one day work towards a starting role.
Yeah, there's not a lot to talk about on this day three. Like you said, I think the Rams maybe should have traded back from like their third rounder or their second rounder or first rounder, trade back somewhere and get some more picks. But I guess CJ Daniels is who I'll talk about by default here. And I think this is a bit later than I think people expected the Rams to address wide receiver. That wide receiver depth did kind of bite them in the playoffs that we saw. But I think Daniels is kind of an interesting fit. I think the Rams really got their guys in this draft. And Daniels is a Rams wide receiver. He's physical, he has the size, he's got some nice IQ, he's got the footwork. I mean, there are athletic limitations to his game, which is why he fell to the six. But the Rams are a team that don't really care about that. As long as you can catch the ball, you're smart enough to run the McVay system, you'll see the field. And I expect Daniels to see the field quite a bit during his rookie year.
Yeah, Rams didn't have a lot of picks, but a team that did have a lot of picks.
Give
Oh,
a draft
sorry,
grade?
we got draft grades first. Sorry.
I know it's bad,
Getting
Mike,
ahead,
but you got to grade
getting
it.
ahead of myself. I like Simpson enough to where I'm not like completely out on this class. I think some of the players like Claire and Keenan are guys that I like, so I'm not like too critical of it, but probably like a B minus for me until I see further. It's just I feel like the Rams weren't necessarily like, we just need like Trent McDuffie and everything's fixed. So there's still like issues that I would have liked to see them address a little bit more, maybe get some more speed in that linebacker room, maybe add like a deep threat to the receiving room to where defenses kind of can't like collapse on them a little bit. So I don't know. Just would like to see more spread out resources to kind of enhance their roster more so than just adding to units and adding depth as maybe long term options. And even that, I still kind of have my questions.
Yeah, this is a very Rams draft. Like they just got their guys, and like I think after the Simpson pick, I would have liked to see them be a little bit more aggressive in addressing their kind of more pressing depth needs or pressing starting needs. And like Claire and Trost are like fine players. They're whatever, but like how much are they really going to help them this upcoming year? And Simpson's finds a pick to the future, but you gotta balance that out, I think, and be balance the future with the immediate. And I think the Rams were too worried about the future, which is why I think I ended up giving them a C minus grade.
Interesting. So yeah, the Rams didn't have a lot of picks, but a team that did, the Miami Dolphins, a team that was very active on all 3 days. We'll start out on night one where they got Caden Proctor and Chris Johnson. Proctor, offensive tackle out of Alabama, Johnson, the cornerback from San Diego State. Bailey, these two selections, very exciting and high upside for the Miami Dolphins. What do you make of these picks?
Yeah, Proctor was a super, super interesting pick. I don't think a lot of people had the Dolphins taking a tackle um, that high, and they do this small trade back with the Cowboys, and I really just think they just got the top player on their board here, and I think this is who the Lions wanted. Also, they were trying to trade up to get Proctor, so kind of a guy that's pretty clearly seen pretty fondly on by the NFL. So I think Proctor's going to start a left tackle. Maybe I didn't watch the Dolphins press conference. Maybe he'll start at a guard kind of like what the Giants are doing with Maui Noah, and then he'll swing out the tackle after maybe the Patrick Paul experiment ends or Austin Jackson's contract expires. But I really like him, and if he can keep his weight under control, he's definitely going to be one of the better tackles, not only in this class but probably in the NFL. But that's going to be the big question with him is just staying disciplined and keeping his weight down. And Chris Johnson was someone who kind of a small school riser here. Him as corner two or cornerback two off the board was very surprising to me. There's a level of competition concern, but the athleticism and the skill set he showed in college gave me enough confidence where I would take him about in this range. Maybe a little bit of a reach. Maybe I would like to see him more mid second, but he's still a good player, and the Dolphins really, really need corner, so I don't hate it.
Very intriguing players. And, Proctor's a guy that the big question was always kind of off field. And it wasn't necessarily that like he was a bad person or anything. It's just like, can he continue to stay in shape through the season to where he can contribute at his highest form? And that's really going to be the question for him. And if he can do so, then yeah, the Dolphins probably honestly got a steal here at pick 12 with what can be a very high caliber tackle. And then Chris Johnson, I think, is one of the more technically refined and physical cornerbacks that is just very impressive in run support, works vertically extremely well in that kind of press bail system. So he's an exciting piece for a secondary that desperately needs a like top cornerback option. So I like the selection, and I'm intrigued to see what the future is in Miami. So they followed up with day two selections of Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker out of Texas Tech in the second round. And in the third round, they make some surprises with Caleb Douglas, wide receiver out of Texas Tech, Will Kazmarek, tight end out of Ohio State, and Chris Bell, wide receiver out of Louisville. Bailey, we both like Douglas, but we'll talk about Rodriguez first. What are your thoughts on this day two haul for the Dolphins?
Yeah, this was Dolphins were going kind of crazy all around the board on day two. And when you have this many picks, just get your guys. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Just go. You This is like your sixth pick and still in the top 100. Go get the guys for highest on your board. And Jacob Rodriguez is someone who maybe not the most pressing need because obviously they have Jordan Brooks, but he does offer a little bit more coverage juice, and he's still learning the position a little bit. But I think he's going to be a great fit next to them. Should be one of the better linebacker deals in the league. And Caleb Douglas was a guy that you and I were high on. He's somebody who was in the sleeper video. I didn't know he was like top of the third round good, but I think the Dolphins got sniped on Malachi Fields. Yes, the Giants traded up and took Malachi Fields. I think the Dolphins kind of got sniped. I'm like, we'll just take our next best receiver, which is Caleb Douglas, which is people are calling it a reach. I had Douglas in this range, so I don't hate this pick at all. I think he definitely showed the ability to be in this top 100 range for a wide receiver with his route running and his size and his speed. This is a really intriguing pick. And Wills Kazmarek, another sleeper. The Dolphins are really pandering to me here. Somebody who I think has nice upside as that tight end too, with his blocking skills in there. So he should see the field a lot, especially on run plays, blocking for Achan. And then Chris Bell, someone who fell in the draft a little bit. This is a guy talked about as a second rounder, but I mean, I think I remember talking to you about this draft. Is like he was a second rounder and he got injured, and he's still a second rounder. So obviously always going to fall due to the injury. And I think the Dolphins got a couple steals in here and a couple reaches, but guys who I would have taken this range anyway. So I think they really nailed this day one and two.
Yeah, I like Rodriguez, and I think this is appropriate value for him. So I'm intrigued by that selection. I do think he plays well off of Jordan Brooks. Douglas is a guy that I had as a third, fourth round grade. So, they're maybe a little early, but I still think he's good enough. He's the go to guy for Texas Tech on third and fourth down in short yardage situations when they need to move the stick. So I think that makes a lot of just like dependability. It speaks high volume on like the type of receiver he is and the reliability that he brings to the table. He's 6'3", runs like a 4.39, and the big question for him is physicality. So can he bulk up? Can he get better? And I do think he got bigger as the offseason went along. He weighed in at like 206 pounds at the combine. So I do trust that he's getting stronger, But that's just the big thing. It's just, can you get more aggressive and physical at the catch point in order to make sure that you are really capitalizing on all the skills you bring to the table. I like Chris Bell more, and I do think Chris Bell is probably going to be the guy that is the like go-to wide receiver in this offense. Of the younger guys, they probably sign like a veteran as well, and they have Malik Washington, obviously. But yeah, I mean, this is a really big opportunity for both Douglas and Bell to establish themselves in this offense, to get a large role as a first-year guy. So these are guys to keep an eye on, because this isn't just like a day two pick that you kind of just forget about. These are guys that are going to have a chance to be high impact players right out the gates. Moving forward to day three, they follow it up with Trey Moore, the edge rusher slash linebacker out of Texas. And then they get Kyle Lewis, the linebacker out of Pittsburgh. In round five, they get Michael Taft, safety out of Texas. Kevin Coleman, Jr., wide receiver from Missouri. Sadu Traore, tight end from Mississippi State. And then in the sixth round, they get DJ Campbell, offensive guard from Texas. And in round seven, they had Max Llewellyn, edge rusher out of Iowa. Bailey, a lot of picks here on day three. Which one stands out to you?
No, Michael, I'll let you go first. I don't want to steal your guy here.
I was kind of doing that so you could
Okay.
maybe narrow down my options. So it's all good.
Okay, that's fine. Let's do Michael Taft. I'm going to steal your Texas guy here, and he was someone who, when you look at his story and walk on Texas, he's playing for 4 years, all that special teams experience, and he's going to be someone who I think is going to play a lot, especially on the special teams, like I mentioned for the Dolphins. But they are also pretty thin at safety, and he could be thrust into some real snaps. So I think they got a pretty productive player here in round five, in those like their 10th pick of the draft. I expect him to contribute a lot as a rookie.
Yeah, the guy I want to go with then is Kyle Lewis, a very exciting coverage linebacker that can probably rotate between linebacker and safety as you need him. He's going to be a versatile chess piece in that second wave of defense, to where I think there's some real intrigue there, and it allows Halfley to have some flexibility. Obviously, Jordan Brooks and Jacob Rodriguez are going to be contributors in that linebacker room, so maybe hard for Lewis to find playtime on the field early, but I think he's just such an impactful player. You can't deny him for long. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what's your overall assessment of this class, where the Dolphins brought in not just your typical seven, they brought in, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 new players to this roster?
I mean, I have to give them an A plus. It's really easy. I think look at the Dolphins draft and you're just looking at the names. And it's like, oh look, they had a bunch of players drafted high. Look how good they are. But it's really easy to mess up top 100 picks. We've seen it in the past where teams are just kind of blowing it on garbage players. And I think the Dolphins took a lot of contributors. They really rebuilt the depth on their team, and they have guys like you said who are going to see a lot of snaps as a rookie. It's probably going to be like a Cardinals from last year situation where rookies are just going to end up starting. Like half their starters are going to be end up rookies, and the guys they took to fill those roles are experienced guys with upside also. And you get somebody like you said, a Kyle Lewis who's going to get deployed a little bit. Really, Caleb Douglas and Chris Bell, who should be nice in that wide receiver room, complementing each other. Will Casimiro is a nice floor and has the upside, and Kevin Coleman, who might be a sleeper contributor in that wide receiver room. And I'm just so excited about this draft. I think that this is going to really turn the Dolphins around.
Pandering to Miami fans after all the hate you got last year, giving them an F. Complete turnaround. So nice step in the right direction if Bailey knows what he's talking about. But I would probably give it an A minus. I do think they benefit a little bit from having so many picks. And if I'm not going to punish teams for not having many picks, I can't like overrate classes just because they have like a bunch and it's hard not to find impact players. But it's still a class where I think the impact is going to be there. And there's just so many very talented pieces that I think, when you look back on this class, if you have like 4 or 5 impact players from 13 picks, that's still like a really good hit rate to where you're excited about it and you can move forward in the right direction. So I like the direction that they took it. And I do think that there's going to be enough impact from this class to still give it a pretty high grade. So moving forward now, we have the Minnesota Vikings, a team that, kind of one of the bigger shocks on draft night with the 18th pick. They selected Caleb Banks, defensive lineman out of Florida. And then they followed it up with 4 day 2 selections where they got Jake Golday, linebacker out of Cincinnati in the second round. They had a Dominique Orange, defensive lineman from Iowa State in the third. Caleb Tiernan, offensive tackle from Northwestern. And Jacoby Thomas, safety from Miami, Florida, also third round picks. We'll start in that first round, Bailey. Caleb Banks, a prospect that, felt like he was falling down the boards a little bit because of the medical concerns. Ultimately, it sounds like Minnesota maybe didn't have any medical concerns because they took him in that range he was probably expected to go prior to those concerns. What do you make of the Banks selection? Do you think he can be a great fit in that Flores defense?
Yeah, this is probably the best landing spot for Banks in terms of Flores getting the most out of him. Like we said, I think in the DT prospect rankings, Banks, his combination of strength and speed is one in this class. He's like on paper and from the highlight tape, the best defensive tackle in this class. It's the consistency that really gets him. But I mean, if he can put it all together, he's going to be one of the better defensive tackles in the league. But I have serious questions about his ability to do that. And like you said, the injury is also a little bit scary. So I don't know. I'm really not a fan of this pick. I think they should have gone in any other direction. Any other player in the first, I think, would have been a better pick for them here.
Bogus. Yeah, I like Banks. I do think as long as they feel confident about the medical evaluation, I understand the selection. I think especially because we know what Flores is capable of with these types of defensive linemen. If Banks can really kind of be used in his best form, I think there's a lot to buy into and a lot to be excited about. So I understand that he had started to fall down the board a little bit. He wasn't necessarily viewed as highly, and some teams maybe were just completely out on him because of the injury concerns, but. I don't know. He's a talented player that's very impactful on the defensive line. So I don't hate the selection as much as most. Going to that day two haul though, Jake Golday, Dominique Orange, Caleb Tiernan, and Jacoby Thomas. I think Golday's a guy that we talked about. It was kind of hard to get a full evaluation on him because he was being used in sort of a weird role, and a lot of teams just kind of avoided his play side just to make sure that they weren't running into the 6'4", 250-pound linebacker. But in this Brian Flores defense, he gets some more speed, more size in a unit that they kind of benched Ivan Pace last year because while the run defense was good, there was just too many liabilities and coverage. A guy like Golday needs to be a little bit better of a processor, needs to be better at just like feel for the game. But I think there's still a lot of upside to him in this defense, and the athletic appeal and size is certainly something that I think Flores was searching for. That day three haul, though, I think is one of the more intriguing sections of this draft where Dominique Orange is more of like the traditional nose. So I think it allows Caleb Banks to maybe step outside a little bit more, operate more as a pass rusher, bring more of his like power profile to the table. Caleb Tiernan provides depth to an offensive tackle room that was beaten and battered last year. And Jacoby Thomas is a productive and exciting safety in a defense that, it seems like Harrison Smith may not be back next year. Bailey, this is a day two haul that did address a lot of the needs for Minnesota, but maybe you still have some questions about it. So let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Golday and Orange were guys that I just personally weren't high on. The NFL was always going to take a guy like Golday this high, and it's really annoying for me because I think these guys are overrated. But they landed with Flores, who's probably going to get the best out of them, and be like, oh no, these were actually good picks. But for my evaluation, I didn't like Golday. Um, he went ahead of like CJ Allen and Anthony Hill, was just crazy to me. I think those guys are just so much more complete linebackers, and they're pretty much on the same level athletically. So I don't really see the argument for Gole over them. And they're just, a lot more sound technically too. And Dominic Orange, I think we'd like to see somebody with a little bit more pass rush juice. And this is kind of a similar issue that we were talking about with the Panthers, where your defensive line is now like Dominic Orange, Caleb Banks, and Jalen Redmond, which, those are good players and you're going to stop the run, but where's the pass rush upside? I'm not really sure that it's there. So, yeah, I'm not really crazy about that. And then Caleb Tiernan was somebody who was higher on. I think they actually do have a bit of a steal with him in round three. I would have probably thought he would have gone round two. A good swing tackle. Going to back up Darisaw and O'Neal, who've had their injury history, so he'll be good if forced to play. And Jacoby Thomas, this is one of the worst picks in the top 100. I borderline did not have this guy draftable. I have no idea how he's fitting this Vikings defense or where they're going to play him. I hope he's not the Harrison Smith replacement, like you said. I think that's going to go terribly. He's just like, he's super aggressive and he's comes downhill and he's nice at that. But I mean, he cheats so much. He was responsible for so many blown plays at Miami that I wouldn't have taken this guy like top 200, let alone top 100.
Yeah, I like Thomas to some degree, but I definitely had him a little bit lower in terms of just overall draft grades. But moving forward to day three, in the fifth round, they got Max Bredesen, the fullback slash tight end from Michigan, Charles Devings, cornerback from Stephen F. Austin, Damon Claiborne, running back from Wake Forest, and Gavin Gerhardt, the center out of Cincinnati. Bailey, one pick from this day three haul. Which one stands out to you?
I gotta stick with the guys in my sleeper video. I go Charles Demings here, who I think ended up in a pretty good landing spot for him. The Vikings signed James Pierre to be their cornerback three, but I mean Demings I think is going to challenge for that spot later in the year. There is going to take some time as he translates from the FCS to the NFL, which is always a big jump. But I mean, he has the skills, he has the size, he has the demeanor to really succeed as as an outside cornerback in the league. And if there's anybody, like I said, with Golden Banks to get the most out of them, it's gonna be Flores. So I'm super excited to see him develop in the league.
Yeah, I think the upside's there for sure, and I'm excited to see what happens for him as well. Moving forward to my sleeper, or maybe not sleeper, but just standout pick from this haul, and it's Damon Claiborne, a guy that I think executes really well as an outside runner, and Kevin O'Connell loves to go in that direction. I think Aaron Jones is still a good back. I think Jordan Mason was a little lackluster, but he had some production as well. But they needed a guy that kind of offered speed around the outside, and I think Claiborne really has a chance to carve out a role and be an impact piece of this offense, especially if he's able to get bigger. But I'm really excited about Claiborne. I think he's a smart runner that can really produce around the outside and maybe provide another element to this offense to help really bring it up another level as we head into 2026. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what's your overall assessment here for the Vikings?
I'm gonna give them a D. I don't think they did a really good job of hitting their needs, and the players that they did take that are hitting their needs are players I'm just not a fan of. Like they're gonna be better against the run for sure, but they've had like I don't see the pass rushing upside really. That's gonna happen. Like, and they also traded Jonathan Grenard during this draft, which I meant to mention, but I would like to see a center earlier. Like, it's just so many question marks with this draft and so many needs that I think went not unaddressed. And I, obviously, you have to trust Flores with the defense, but this is such a defensive heavy draft that you're gonna have to expect your defense to carry you throughout this year. And I don't know. I'm having difficulties. Like, I like Tiernan, I like Demings. Bredson's gonna be like a fullback. Claiborne's gonna be like second behind that depth chart, and Gerhardt's gonna be like, I guess, a competition for the center two spot, but I don't know. This is a team that's worse than they're going to be next year, which is already a disappointing year for them. So pretty bad draft for them in my opinion.
I wasn't as low as you. I gave them C+. I think guys like Demings and Claiborne on day three were nice selections. I think Banks is a high impact player that I'm bought into more than most, I think. But yeah, there's still definitely like some questions when it comes to just the overall sustainability of some of these selections. I'm surprised you aren't higher on it just because they were aggressive in addressing needs. So I don't know. I feel like the needs criticism from your end is maybe a little unjustified, but overall it's like a decent haul. But I gave it a C+.
Yeah, it's just like the needs they got. Again, like they need a DT. They take Caleb Banks. I'm not like crazy about Caleb Banks. It's like you need a safety. You get Jacoby Thomas, who I'm not crazy about. You need a center. You don't really like get a center. Jordan Addison is on his fifth year option. He has some off field stuff. Where's the wide receiver pick? I mean, I just don't really understand it. Like they're aggressive in like getting their needs, but I mean, I don't know. I just don't like the players they got their needs, and I think they left some needs unaddressed. So I don't think this is going to work out for them. But I've been wrong before, so I'm rooting for the Vikings to prove me wrong here.
Fair enough. Moving forward now to the New England Patriots, a team that maybe made some surprises as well with their first round selection of Caleb Lomu, offensive tackle out of Utah. Then in the second round, they trade up a bit to get Gabe Akis, edge rusher out of Illinois. In the third round, they got Eli Raridan, tight end out of Notre Dame. We'll stop there for now. Bailey, in that first round, Caleb Lomu, maybe a guy that hasn't been connected to the Patriots much in the draft process, but offensive tackle was never really a question of need. So, what do you think of this selection for New England? And do you think Lomu can be that long term right tackle to really kind of keep the trenches strong and dependable in New England?
Yeah, the Patriots got Caleb Lomu. This is interesting to me. Aside from his kind of weird dancing, the Patriots, like you said, didn't have a really pressing need at tackle, but they are going to trade a future pick for AJ Brown. Seems like it's all but confirmed, and Bill Campbell and Morgan Moses are good starting tackles right now, but you know, Campbell had a really bad playoffs, and I mean, he has the ability to be a really good left tackle in the league, but mentally, I don't know. Like we've seen players fall apart after bad runs or bad stretches of play before, so it would be the most shocking thing to me in the world if he just gets like the yips or something and just mentally isn't there. And then Morgan Moses is also 35, so I kind of like this pick as a pick looking to the future. You don't want to be too aggressive in addressing your immediate needs. You want to kind of play more the long game. And like tackles a position, like I said, with the Panthers, I'm never going to hate on a team getting too much of. Lomu needs to sit probably anyways. He needs to add some more weight before you can really trust him out there at left tackle or right tackle. So this is kind of an ideal situation for him, kind of sitting behind these two guys. And then next year you have the option of okay, maybe you want to kick Will Campbell inside, or maybe it's time to move on from Morgan Moses, and we know we have a replacement for him.
Yeah, Lomo's an intriguing piece, and I do think that there's reason to buy into the development. And I think he's a guy that kind of needed to sit and wait a little bit. So I like the thought process there. It's just will he make those developmental strides? I had probably him comfortably as OT6, and the five guys above him I was a lot higher on, just like a clear tier above or whatever. So there's still some concern there to where maybe it was like forcing a need a little bit too much, but it sounds like they had him kind of grouped in with those other six guys in the class to where it wasn't necessarily like, now our offense tackle board has been depleted and we just need to get someone to fill in the role. I probably would have preferred going for like a Jude Bowery on round four, just looking at it in hindsight. But overall, I mean, it's fine. Like I think the development and athletic upside is there to where Lomu could easily turn into a very good pick. So we'll see what happens for him. Moving to those day two selections, though, I do like the picks. Akis is a guy that maybe doesn't have like the most twitch, but he's such a fundamental like receiving type or wrestling type player that just consistently find ways to produce. He's a 4-year contributor to that Illinois defense, and I feel like that's something that I'm always intrigued by when guys are like immediately able to make an impact in college. It seems like they're able to kind of find success out of the gates in the pros as well. Eli Raridan, obviously, we talked about it in our tight end rankings. He was my tight end 5 for this class cycle or for this draft cycle, and he was a guy that he just needs to continue adding weight to his frame and getting stronger as a blocker. But I think the traits and receiving ability and just overall frame that he brings to the table are exciting enough to buy into. And he has some time to grow behind Hunter Henry to where he can really kind of get that time and patience and eventually become a contributor.
Yeah, this was a good day two approach by the Patriots. Like, if you're gonna take backup players, make sure they're backups at like kind of premium positions. And Ack is somebody probably gonna start out as an edge three for the Patriots. And then, I think Harold Landry might be getting cut next year. He's on a pretty big contract, and it's nice to have an option. It's like, okay, we move on. We know we have somebody who can fill that role, and he's gonna play a lot still as an edge three. And like we said with Raridan, he's gonna be sitting behind Hunter Henry for a little bit, but he's also gonna see the field probably as a 10 and 2 or 3. Maybe you decide to move on from Henry because he's getting a little older too, and is on a I'm not sure his contract situation actually. So I think the Patriots are giving themselves options. They're not handcuffing themselves to the players on their roster, and they're kind of being smart by filling needs, but also filling kind of premium positions that kind of give them flexibility heading into next year.
So moving forward to the day 3 selections, they didn't have a round 4 pick, but with the 5th round pick, they got Karan Prunties, cornerback out of Wake Forest. In round 6, they added Demetrius Crownover, offensive tackle from Texas A&M, and Namdi Obiaizer, linebacker from TCU. Then in the 7th round, they added Jam Miller, running back from Alabama, and Quintavious Hutchins, edge rusher from Boston College. Bailey, if you had to pick one guy to talk about here from this haul, who stands out to you?
I'm gonna pick the guy that you forgot, Baron Morton. I know you're not a fan of the pick
Oh
man,
yeah, I
but
did forget. Oops.
can't delete him from the board. Won't delete him from the Patriots draft, unfortunately. But yeah, he's somebody who like I think he's gonna make the roster. The Patriots usually carry 3 QBs, and I do think out of the options available, he was kind of the most pro ready or like NFL ready out of the options. And if the worst case scenario happens and you need somebody to like come to the field in the QB3 in a super emergency situation, I think you do a lot worse than Morton. He's experienced, he has some nice anticipation. He has like a pretty good quick arm, and he's a pretty good processor too in the short and intermediate areas. The arm strength, the touch, the deep field stuff is not there, but you're asking for a guy to execute very basic part of your offense. I think Morton is pretty good at that, which is all you can really ask for out of your QB3.
Yeah, that backup job is definitely open. I mean, no offense to Tommy Cutlets, but I think there's a clear opportunity for someone to establish themselves as long-term QB2. So we'll see what happens for him. The guy I want to talk about is Demetrius Crownover. Offensive tackle is obviously like a long-term outlook need for the Patriots. And while Moses and Campbell are definitely there right now, I think Moses is probably getting replaced, and it might be Lomu, but Lomu's also a developmental guy that still has a lot of work to grow into. So if he maybe doesn't have the athletic development that you'd like to see to where it's just I mean play strength development that you'd like to see and it's just all athleticism, he could very easily not be the guy that steps into the right tackle role. Crownover's a guy that we both kind of liked. I wouldn't completely dismiss him as an option to maybe be that long-term right tackle for the Patriots, and even if he is just a backup, I think there's still a lot of value in having a swing tackle of Crownover's caliber to kind of be able to play on both sides and operate and keep the team strong when a guy like Campbell goes down with injury like we saw in the playoffs, where you aren't necessarily like desperately pushing him back into a situation where he's just not really that serviceable, and you're almost looking at him as a liability on the offensive line. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what's your overall view on this Patriots class?
Yeah, I give the Patriots a B minus. I really like this draft by them. I think they did a good job of realizing that the roster wasn't perfect, and they're not going to make the Super Bowl every year. They kind of get complacent and sit on their hands and start taking weird players at weird positions because we need our guys. We were so good at drafting. Look at our Super Bowl run. We know what we're doing. So they did good to get premium backups who can develop into starters. And I guess Corey Dern won the nose tackle work because no defensive tackle pick out of the Patriots here. So he's got that job locked up. So good for him. And I do think this grade is kind of AJ Brown trade dependent because if the AJ Brown trade doesn't happen, then I probably question the lack of getting an immediate starter after that Super Bowl run, where you probably want somebody who's a bit splashier, making a bigger impact, especially to build off that run. But I think it's all but certain that's going to happen. So I'm okay giving them a B minus right now.
Yeah, I would say probably B for me. I think the Akis picks and Raritan guy, like I like their first three selections. Lomu is developmental selection, so it's more of like a wait and see, but I understand the thought process, and I do think that there's upside there. And then I'd like Akis and Raritan to contribute for this team, especially as we get 2-3 years down the line, they get to develop some more. So overall, I'll give it a B. Probably could have done a little bit better, but not anything that I'm like too critical of. I think I like the overall outlook and just approach that they had. Now moving forward to the New Orleans Saints, and in the first round they added Jordan Tyson, wide receiver from Arizona State. Bailey, I know you're a fan of Tyson. What are your thoughts here on the selection here at number 8? And do you think it was warranted to select him maybe over guys like Makai Lemon?
Yeah, I mean Tyson, I think was if he was healthy, I think he would have ended up as my wide receiver one. But it's just the injuries, the hamstring, the ACLs, it's always going to make me question how much he can stay healthy. And obviously, like Michael said, we're not doctors, we don't know. But I mean, guys who are injured tend to stay injured and always battle through that, especially with the hamstring stuff. I mean, with JSN, he was dealing with some hamstring stuff, and the Seahawks like we changed his shoe size, and now no more hamstring issues. So I'm not sure if that's like it's going to be that easy for Tyson. But if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be an absolute steal for them here. I think he's somebody who probably should have gone a little bit higher. Maybe, if he was fully healthy, I probably would have liked him more than Tate for the Tysons, but more than Tate for the Titans. But, with Tyson in Olave, that's a very injured wide receiver room. It's kind of very boom or bust for the Saints. And I'm not sure how much I love that approach.
Yeah, I think Tyson's an exciting player. And I do kind of wonder about the overlap in skill sets between Tyson and Olave. I think both guys are kind of better operating in that 10 to 15 range. And maybe, some selections we'll talk about later, like Bryce Lance, can help alleviate that like focus on the field. But I don't know. Both guys kind of have like similar skill sets and usages to where I am curious to see how they contribute working off one another, but I think there's still a possibility for it. I like Tyson. I think the overall approach for this draft was let's make sure that we get Shuck surrounded by talent. And I think they did a good job of that here in the first round. Moving forward to day 2, where they got Christian Miller, defensive lineman, in the second round from Georgia. And then third round, they added another Georgia player and tight end Oscar Delp. Bailey, what do you make of these two selections?
Yeah, kind of weird picks for the Saints here. I'm not really sure what they're doing. Like wide receiver is obviously like I think a pretty big need for them. And then they go and take Kristen Miller, who I think is gonna be playing backup nose tackle for them. He's someone who I thought might have been better at a maybe like a three tech position, but he's been gaining a lot of weight. He keeps packing on weight, and now I guess he's a backup nose tackle behind Godcho, who might leave after next year. But I mean, I'm never a fan of backup nose tackle picks, especially in the second round, especially with the amount of needs that you have on the field. And I mean, with Delp, I mean, I didn't think that tight end was very high up on their list of needs, but I mean, Delp should be their tight end too behind Jawan Johnson, and he was used as a blocker mainly. He never really got the production that he deserved. Like when you see him on the tape, he's open all the time, and Gunnar Stockton just can't hit him. So someone who's definitely a victim of the offense he played in, and should be a better player in the NFL than he was in college.
Yeah, I think Saints fans are ready to move on from Johnson, so we'll see if maybe Delp can help make that exit process happen for them. But yeah, I think Delp's an exciting playmaking and receiving receiver to where or receiving threat to where he can contribute to this offense and maybe see a more evolved role in the NFL. I like Miller. I think he's someone that's versatile enough to plug into that defensive line where they definitely need some help in the trenches. But overall, yeah, I mean, the instant impact from these day two selections, we'll see what happens. But right now, I think they're maybe a little less than some of the other teams that we've seen in this class. Moving forward to day three, round four, they added Jeremiah Wright, offensive guard from Auburn, and Bryce Lance, wide receiver from North Dakota State. In round five, they got Lorenzo Styles, the slot defender slash safety from Ohio State. And then in round six, they added Barryon Brown, wide receiver and kind of return man from LSU, and TJ Hall in the seventh round, the defensive back from Iowa. Bailey, is there a pick that stands out to you from this group?
Yeah, I mean, the Saints did that triple dip at wide receiver, and I'm going to take the third. I'm going to talk about the third guy they took, Barryon Brown. I think this is going to be kind of the Rashid Shaheed replacement in terms of what he does for the offense and his ability as a punt returner slash kickoff return. Like one of the most dynamic returners in college football, and he is just so good with the ball in his hands, and he's so fast too. He's just, I think it's going to be a pretty seamless transition for his fit in this offense.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Bryce Lance, and I think he's just such an impact vertical threat to where you almost want to plug him into that offense maybe right away. And I don't think he's necessarily going to beat out Vele for a starting job right away, but I do think that he's going to be rotating in enough because of how well he threatens defenses downfield with his size and speed and just overall ability to get his body adjusted. I think taking a guy like that to open up opportunities underneath for Tyson and Olave is going to really help this offense kind of open up as a whole. Yeah, I mean, I think the big question for me is just how many like bodies are they going to be getting out there? You know, is Lance going to find opportunities, or are they going to be more strict and trying to stick to their veterans that they have on roster already? But I do like Lance, and I think there's an upside there to where it's intriguing, and it could help potentially fill out this wide receiver room where it was almost looking like Olave and Scraps early last season. They traded for Vele, who helps, but adding these two rookies as well, I think really, three rookies, I think really helps elevate the unit and could potentially transform this offense even further. So, what is your grade for the Saints draft?
Uh, I'm gonna give them a D. The Saints proved me wrong last year, and I hope they do again this year. You know, I'm never gonna root against players succeeding or like teams not having good drafts so I'm right. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope this draft is amazing for them. But the Saints just approach drafts in a way I don't agree with. Like I mentioned before, the triple dip of wide receiver is crazy. Like it's actually just insane. And like it's a really green wide receiver room. Like there's not a lot of experience outside of Olave, who's pretty frequently injured. And then if he gets injured, relying on like Tyson and then Valet and like Bryce Lance as your wide receivers, not the most experienced group. So I don't know. And like, where was the edge pick here? And like, they did trade for Tyree Wilson and they signed Anthony Jennings after the draft, but I would have probably liked to see an edge pick here and maybe sign a veteran wide receiver. I don't really like how they're like, we'll go with the young guys in the wide receiver room and we'll get the veteran edges. You probably needed to switch those around and maybe, you know, instead of Barry Brown, take a edge rusher, instead of Bryce Lance, take an edge rusher, and then sign a wide receiver in free agency. Just and like I don't like Kristen Miller. I didn't have a really high grade on him. Oscar Delp is fine. Probably should go in this range based on the tens that got taken ahead of him, but I don't know. I just don't like the Saints approach. So no, I'm going down to D minus. I don't like this at all.
I'm not nearly as low as you. I have B minus on it. I do have some questions about just some of the picks, and there were guys that I had graded higher at some of these selections. But overall, I think first three selections I like them, and I understand the thought process in most of the day three picks. So I'm there on it. I gave it a B minus. So we're moving forward now to New York, and we start with the Giants. At the fifth pick, they have Arvell Reese, linebacker, edge rusher. It seems like he's going to be full time linebacker for the Giants. And then with the 10th pick, they get Francis Noah, the offensive lineman from Miami. We'll start there. We'll talk about these two guys because they're so notable top 10 selections. Bailey, intriguing selections. Both guys probably not going to be playing in the positions they were kind of talked about as draft prospects in 2020 in the 2026 draft cycle. So, what are your thoughts on these two? And do you think the change in role, or maybe for like Reese, kind of sticking to his initial role, is good for him, or do you think it kind of hurts the appeal of their selections?
Yeah, definitely get lower on it when they talk about using him as a straight up inside linebacker. I think a lot of the appeal with Reese was his ability to grow as an edge rusher, kind of that Micah Parsons um, kind of mold where he played a lot of linebacker, but he flashed some at edge rusher. So if he continues to develop his edge skills, he'll be one of the best pass rushers in the league. And with Reese moving into inside linebacker isn't the worst thing for him. He was really good in that role, and he's so good in the run defense. And there will be plays where he's going to be rushing the passer. He's not going to just firmly line up off ball. I expect him to be on ball quite a bit, but the pick does lose its shine and its appeal a little bit when you're talking about moving him to the linebacker, which is a less valuable position than edge. He can also take his teammate Sonny Styles if you want a linebacker. So I'm very excited to see how he's deployed by the Giants. And Maui Noah, somebody put out an O-line. I think they said he's going to start out at right guard, even though he's kind of looked at as a tackle. I always thought he might be more of a guard just because, he has the range issues that a lot of the bigger tackles have. And I think eventually he will kick out to one of the tackle spots, but for now he'll provide a lot of instant value from that right guard spot. And then who knows in the future where he'll play.
Yeah, I'm disappointed for both players. I think Reese would be more exciting as a full-time edge rusher, and I think Maui Noah is good enough to be a tackle, so I'd rather have him there than on the inside. And I'd rather pick kick Illuminor inside the guard. So ultimately, I'm a little annoyed with both selections here for the Giants. I think both are very good players that I had graded highly. It's just, I don't know. I'm not as enthused when it sounds like they're limiting their availability and just overall opportunity to grow into the great players I think they can be. Moving forward to the day 2 selections, they got Colton Hood, cornerback out of Tennessee, and Malachi Fields, wide receiver from Notre Dame. Bailey, these are two guys that really were some of the best players in college football, but maybe had more questions as prospects. Hood felt like a guy that was maybe in first round discussions. Cornerback ultimately kind of slipped down the board as a whole. Malachi Fields, maybe not the greatest athlete, but still a tremendous jump ball receiver. Kind of fits that traditional Giants mold of just like the big body, big pass catcher type. Do you think these guys are going to contribute for this team going into 2026? And what do you think the long-term outlook is?
Yeah, absolutely. I expect Hood to compete with Greg Newsome for that outside corner role almost immediately. He's press corner. He's scrappy. He's athletic. He can cover wide receiver ones if you want to. Although I'm not really sure you want him to do that, but that might be the role he's forced to play on the Giants, depending on how good. Oh my God, who's that Saints corner they have? I'm blanking on his name.
Paulson Adebo.
Yeah, Paulson Adebo. How good Paulson Adebo ends up being. I think Hood is better as a CB2 in that role, guarding guys with less takes. But I mean, he's perfect mentality for what they want out of their corners. And Malachi Fields is somebody who, they trade up and they snipe the Dolphins, and he's someone who's, he's capable of making those ridiculous catches. Probably, one of the better possession receivers in this class. Never really put it together. The production was never there for him, but another guy who's probably gonna be better in the NFL than he was in college.
Yeah, I think both guys have their roles for this team, but I'm not necessarily like super thrilled with the selection of Fields. I feel like there were just better talents on the board, more impactful players. Fields is a guy that you're kind of trusting as like this jump ball weapon, but I feel like the Giants really needed that kind of reliable number 2 wideout, and I don't feel it's been addressed yet. So I didn't love the Fields addition, and I think there's still big questions for that team as they head into the season, especially when you have such a young quarterback. It's kind of on you to enhance the roster and get some better like side pieces. And Mooney, Austin, Fields, it's not enough for me to where I feel confident about the group going forward. So yeah, just wasn't how I would have liked to see them address the position with that 3rd round pick. Moving forward to day 3, where they only have 3 selections in the 6th round. Bobby Jamison Travis, the nose tackle out of Auburn, J.C. Davis, the offensive lineman from Illinois, and Jack Kelly, the linebacker from BYU. Bailey, just 3 guys to pick from, but who's one that stands out to you?
I like J.C. Davis. He's someone who I think, even though he's in the 6th round, I think he's going to be like the offensive tackle 3 for them. His only real competition is Marcus Bowe, who, I'm not sure if this guy's a tackle. I think he played a little left tackle for them last year, and he was okay, but he's like a weird size player. He's such a weird guy. I'm not sure. J.C. Davis, a lot more of your traditional tackle from a size perspective, from an experience perspective, and he's someone I can see who can really step in if an injury happens.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Bobby Jamison Travis, a fan of, or a guy that I really like in the process, and I think he's an intriguing nose tackle. Obviously the Dexter Lawrence trade kind of sent shockwaves through the NFL right before the draft. He's a guy that I think can really contribute as a long-term and full-time nose tackle in the NFL. I think there's still some development needed, so maybe I would have liked to see him landing somewhere that would have given him a little bit more time. But now Jameson Travis thrust into an opportunity to maybe make that impact right away. And I think, when you're surrounded by such good edge rushers, it's easy to kind of just, be solid at doing what you need to do and just being that run stuffer and not having to worry about so much more. And I think Jameson Travis can do that. So I wouldn't be shocked if Bobby Jameson Travis can be a starter for this team at some point in 2026 and a long term answer at the nose tackle position going forward. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what's your grade here for the New York Giants?
I'm giving them an A minus. The position switching is a little bit weird, like we mentioned, with Reese not playing the position he's good at, and Marino not playing the position he's we projected him to play at. But I mean, I still think these guys are eventually like I think Reese is eventually going to move out to the edge, and I think Malino is eventually going to move out to the tackle. So I mean, I like getting them and putting them in roles where they can contribute, and still kind of grow, still kind of develop in kind of less high pressure situations. So I kind of like that approach. I mean, and they got hit on all their needs. I don't think there's anything missing here. Maybe like a three tech I would have liked. I don't really like their room. Like they have like Darius Alexander there. So I mean, there's definitely some upgrades that they could have done there. But I mean, every other need they hit on, and they got guys that I like. So it's hard for me to be too critical of this draft.
Yeah, I think until I see the usage like really fail on the field, I'm not going to be too critical either. So I'll give it a B plus. I do have some questions about just like I think Malachi Fields was a bad pick. And it's not necessarily that I think Fields sucks or anything. It's just I don't see him being impactful enough to really like the selection here. And I think they needed to do a better job of like surrounding Jackson Dart with more talent on this offense. So I do have questions there, but overall, I think it was still a solid haul. And getting guys like Arvell Reese and Francis Maui Noah are highly graded guys for me. So I like the selections and I like Bobby Jameson Travis on day three. I legitimately do. So I'm excited to see what happens there, and we'll see what happens. But I think there's enough to buy into and understandable selections to where I give them a B plus. But staying in New York, going to the AFC, it's the New York Jets, another team that got quite active on day one. They had David Bailey, edge rusher out of Texas Tech with the second pick of the draft. With the 16th pick, they got Kenyon Sadiq, tight end out of Oregon. And at number 30, they took Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver from Indiana. Bailey, very busy day one for the New York Jets. What do you make of these picks? And do you think it helps maybe take this Jets team from a team that was picked number two as a bottom of the barrel type of organization to maybe a dark horse opportunity in 2026?
Yeah, I mean, this Jets draft might have been too good for their own good. They might have put themselves out of QB range with the guys they could. David Bailey, my edge one, such a good player. And I mean, there's no pressure on this Jets team heading into this year, which I think is a big thing for all the players they drafted. I expect a lot of them to see the field, and there's no pressure. Like if Bailey's gonna mess up some run stops, who cares? He's gonna get better, and I don't think the Jets as an organization really care about that. He's only gonna get better with experience. So I think this is kind of the perfect spot for him to kind of play in a low pressure situation where he can just kind of get the snaps he needs to further refine his game. At Texas Tech, he was very protected in the role he played. He's taken a lot off the field on like kind of these first downs and second downs where they might be running and then bring back in on third and longs and just let him rush. He needs to be a more every down player. I think he'll get that. He'll get there with some development. So that's good spot for the Jets. Kane Sadiq, a pick I don't think anybody was really expecting. Think I saw somewhere that the Jets are like the first team in like 50 years or maybe ever to take a tight end in like round two and round one on back to back years. So it'd be exciting to see his fit next to Mason Taylor. I think Sadiq was more going to be the move tight end and Taylor's going to be more the inline guy. And that's going to be one of the better tight end duels in the league. I'm really, really excited to see how they work out. I think they complement each other quite well. And Omar Cooper was the guy I was way higher on. I was kind of shocked to see him kind of continually slip. Might have been out of the first round, but the Jets trade up and they get him. And he's one of I think he was like my wide receiver 4. They got him at like wide receiver 5 or maybe 6. I forget who went ahead of him, but someone who's just so good, so hard to poke holes in his game from a tape perspective, from a production and usage standpoint. You kind of see holes like, all right, he wasn't that productive against top competition. He's usage tapered off towards the end of the year, but I mean he's so good. And after he ran that 4.4 or like 4.42 at the combine, I was completely sold on this guy. He's closer to the top 3 of like Lemon, Tate and Tyson than he was to the Boston Concepcion guys for me. And, I think the Justice absolutely nailed this day one.
Yeah, it was an exciting call, and I think it is very impactful. And maybe Sadiq was more impactful than we noticed on draft night, where that second tight end selection was maybe a telltale sign of what was to come with the other picks of tight ends being taken early compared to the consensus or expectation. But overall, yeah, I think these are three very good picks that are going to be long term pieces no matter what happens for the future of the Jets. So I'm excited about it. And I think Omar Cooper is a great option opposite of Garrett Wilson to really kind of provide stability to that offense moving forward. So on day two, they only had one selection, but it's D'Angelo Ponzi, undersized but very talented cornerback from Indiana. Bailey, what are your thoughts on Pons, and do you think he can be like the long term answer on the boundary for New York?
Yeah, this Pons pick is super, super interesting from the Jets because the Jets corner room is kind of a mess right now. They don't really have that kind of like alpha lockdown cornerback one, and that's what Pons was in college. And the biggest question for him is going to be: is the size and the weight and the length going to limit him from being that in the NFL? And I think it's really unknown right now. And the Jets, after I think they had their 3 first round picks, like, all right, we got our guys that we know are going to be good in the NFL, or we think are going to be good in the NFL. Let's kind of take a risk on Pons, who is a bit more of an unknown. I think at his very worst, he'll still be a very productive nose or nickel or slot corner. So they're going to try him on the outside. If he wins there, great. If not, they'll move him inside. And he's definitely someone I have a hard time seeing busting in the NFL.
He's an exciting player, and yeah, I mean, he just felt so undeniable in college that it's hard to think that he's just going to randomly fall off in the NFL. He proved himself against NFL talent, so I'm excited to see what happens for him, and I think he can make it work. Moving forward to day three, in the fourth round, they got Darrell Jackson, defensive lineman from Florida State, and Cade Klubnik, quarterback from Clemson. In the sixth round, they got a Nez Cooper, offensive guard from Miami, Florida, and in the seventh round, they got VJ Payne, safety from Kansas State. Bailey, some intriguing selections here on day three. Which one stands out to you?
I like Gerald Jackson here. I think he was someone who I kind of, when I was doing my draft evaluation on him, I thought he was going to be like kind of the best value nose tackle. He's not doesn't have the pass rushing upside that some of the other top guys have, but I mean his run stopping ability is so solid. And they did trade for Devondre Sweat, but as he transitioned to more of this like 3-4 defensive front, Sweat does have conditioning issues. He has some, staying on the field problems, and Jackson is going to see a lot of spot play his rookie year, and he's someone who I think can be a really reliable backup. And we'll see some looks with both him and Sweat on the field, and that's going to be a nice run stopping duo.
Yeah, I think this is a intriguing haul, but the guy I want to talk about, I think I got to talk about, is Cade Klubnik, a guy that we were talking about as a potential first round pick this past offseason. Didn't necessarily have the year that you were hoping for, and he fell down the board a little bit. There were talks about injury. He said at the combine that he couldn't even take the stairs up to his team meetings at a certain point in the year. He was strictly on the elevator. So I don't know. The play was really bad in 2025. I think that's worth addressing. But if he can recapture that ability from 2024 that we saw, there's real reason to buy in on what he can be in the NFL. And, working with a kind of traditional coach and Frank Reich as the offense coordinator, there's going to be an opportunity for him to kind of step in and maybe be that dependable kind of delivery man type quarterback to where there's enough weapons around him to where he can really kind of get the ball out, get the ball in space, get the ball to his playmakers, and maybe that sets up the offense to be good enough to where they head into 2026 and say, maybe, or head into 2027 with the idea of, let's give Cade Klubnik one more year and see what we have in him because, we won 6 games and now we're kind of out of range of some of the quarterbacks that are in this class. So there's an opportunity there for Klubnik. We'll see if he can capitalize on it. If he plays like he did in 2025, then that isn't going to happen. But if he can play like we saw in 2024 and flashes in 2023, then there's a real chance for him to be the long term answer for New York. And that's all you need. You need that opportunity, and Klubnik's going to get it. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, you seem very high on this class. What's your grade?
I don't know if I gone soft this year or something, Michael, but I'm giving this one an A plus as well. I think the Jets just nailed every single pick here. Like I said, with the Dolphins, it's really easy to kind of seem like, they just had a bunch of high picks, but there are a ton of picks in the first and second I did not like, and the Jets had most of the picks I did like in the first round and the second round. And I mean that offense, when you're talking about the QB stepping into 2027, it's like, okay, you have Garrett Wilson, Omar Cooper, Kenyon Sadiq, Mason Taylor, Brees Hall, probably still that great O line that they've managed to build. This is like an ideal spot for a QB to walk into. And I think the Jets have set themselves up very well for that 2020 season. And like I said before, the only downside of this draft they might be too good. These players might make too much of an impact and keep them out of that QB1, QB2 spot.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think for me personally, I'm giving it an A minus. I like the players that they added. I didn't necessarily have a pick that I didn't like. Um, so I guess maybe I should be
Come
even higher.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, come
I'll give
on.
it an A. I'll give it an A. I think there's a lot to like with this class. So I'm really excited about it, and I think there's real potential for it to be one of those draft classes that we look back on and we say, wow, the Jets absolutely killed it. But it's also a little easier to do that when you have 3 first round picks and you don't stray too far from consensus. So the appeal's there. Now it's about the execution. We'll see what happens for them. But nice draft for the Jets. Moving forward now to the Philadelphia Eagles, another team that had some exciting selections in this draft. They traded up and got Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver from USC. Bailey, obviously the AJ Brown trade, I would say all but confirmed with this trade up. Do you think Lemon can be that solid, dependable, sturdy option on the outside and in an Eagles offense that maybe asks the receivers to do a little bit more as like run blockers and stuff like that?
Yeah, this is a really, really interesting pick. Lemon to the Eagles was not something I was expecting. Like maybe he talks about something like a Cooper or Concepcion, but Lemon, he's kind of more of an over the middle of the field type of receiver. Kind of a guy who wins that way with his route running and his hands and his separation skills. So the Eagles not traditionally a team that loves their over the middle guys, but this may signal kind of an offensive philosophy shift for them, and they want those playmakers that can actually get the ball over the middle of the field and able to get open. And, Lemon is just such a good fit for them here. And I mean, I can't really hate on the pick too much. I'm just more worried about the fit, but I'm excited about the fit because I think this is going to be an offensive evolution for the Eagles.
So moving forward to day 2, and they get Eli Sowers, tight end out of Vanderbilt, and Markel Bell, offensive lineman from Miami. Bailey, these are 2 picks that I feel like there's a lot of varied opinions on both prospects. Where do you stand on this day 2 haul for Philadelphia?
Yeah, this is like I don't know. Like I think they're gonna play Stowers at tight end. Are they taking another receiver here? I don't know. Like I think he'll line up at tight end, and he'll back up Goddard. Kind of been using a similar role to Calcaterra, and he's someone who does need to improve his blocking a lot. But he can sit for a while. I don't think he's gonna be used in that blocking situation that much. I mean, the Eagles. I'm not sure how much their offense changed from 2024, but I remember from watching that they don't really even have their tight end on the field that much in terms of blocking. So he'll get his opportunities kind of in the slot out wide a little bit. And, he's so athletic and he's such a good receiver that I think he's going to be a really good Goddard replacement in 2027.
Yeah, it's an exciting upside pick, and I think they're willing to wait it out and see if he can kind of develop into what they want from their tight end. But also, there's a chance where he's just kind of this like boundary receiver for them, and he's just operating almost like a Matt Collins for the Eagles. So he's an interesting player, and I think there's definitely a role for him in the NFL. It's just figuring out where that role is and how it pertains to Philadelphia. Moving forward to day 3, round 5, they got Cole Payton, quarterback out of North Dakota State. In round 6, they got Micah Morris, offensive guard from Georgia. And in round 7, they added guys like Cole Wisniewski, safety from Texas Tech, UR Bernard, the defensive lineman, I guess, kind of, he's just a question mark right now, out of Nigeria. And then Keyshawn James Newby, the edge rusher from New Mexico. So, Bailey, exciting haul for day 3, especially with that Bernard pick. Who's someone you want to talk about with these 5 selections that the Philadelphia Eagles had?
Yeah, before we move on to day 3, I just want to talk about Markel Bell quick. He's someone who I thought the Eagles didn't. They gave a lot of snaps to Fred Johnson over the past couple of years, and Markel Bell I think is a better tackle than Fred Johnson is. And I'm not sure this is like right tackle of the future Markel Bell, but I think he's a higher upside backup lineman than they currently have. So I really like that pick. And they also traded a third for Jonathan Grenard, and they kind of addressed their edge need in that way too. So kind of moving on to day 3 now. The guy I want to talk about was Cole Payton. Cole Payton was someone I think you and I were both higher on Michael. He was our QB3s, and he's someone who actually stylistically is very similar to Jalen Hurts. He's kind of that runner, athletic QB who does his best work outside the numbers. He's got the arm, he's got the deep field ability, but some question marks over the middle of the field. So I think this is a great developmental pick for the Eagles. He is in a really crowded QB room, unfortunately. Like they signed Andy Dalton, they still have Tanner McKee, so he's kind of entering there as the QB4, but he's going to make the roster. He's probably too talented not to. And, if things go south with Jalen Hurts or he gets injured, I think Cole Payton is kind of the best next guy up to replace what they need from him long term.
Yeah, so for me, I want to talk about Cole Wisniewski, a guy that really kind of stood out at North Dakota State, eventually transferred to Texas Tech, and he's a guy that I don't think he's like the flashiest athlete, but he's always been productive. He's got great size, great frame, just great ability to kind of make plays around the field. I thought he was almost a little underrated in terms of just like the overall impact he was having on that Texas Tech defense. He's 24, but I'm not too worried about that. I think safety is especially a position where maybe being a little bit older can help you as you enter the league. But I don't know. We've seen Philadelphia kind of swing on these day three safety prospects, and they all seem to kind of work out pretty well. Not saying Wisniewski's now guaranteed to be the next one, but I think he's a guy that there's enough to buy into based on the production that he's shown over his college career. That if he continues to play at like a solid level, he could find an opportunity to start for this Eagles secondary, and it wouldn't shock me if he's now the next like day three safety that they get. That's just found his way into starting for this Philadelphia defensive backs room. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, seems like an intriguing class. Maybe some split opinions on all these different prospects, but where do you stand on this overall haul?
I'm giving them an A minus. The Eagles are just a team that always seems to nail the draft, just from a value perspective. They're just going to outvalue every other team on the board every single time. Like such a shrewd trade up to kind of steal Mekhi Lemon from the Steelers there, and Stowers is going to develop into their tight end in the future here. Markel Bell is a high upside backup who has a pretty good floor too, and just a bunch of intriguing day three developmental guys who are probably going to produce here. They all have clear kind of roles to producing for this Eagles team, and just like Eagles glazing, but they always just do such a good job on the draft every year.
I'm giving it a B. I love Lemon, but overall, I think I still have more questions about this draft haul. I love the Grenard trade, so for incorporating that, maybe it could bump it up to like B plus. But yeah, I mean, I just have more questions about Stowers and Bell than it seems the Eagles do. So we'll see what happens for them, and maybe with development, and when we look back on this in like a year, maybe we come back to it in multiple years, we find it to be a lot better of a draft class. But right now, I'm giving it a B. So now we move forward to the other Pennsylvania team, the team that the Eagles sniped on draft night, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They started off their night at 21 with Maxi Honachort, offensive tackle out of Arizona State. And then in the second round, they got Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver from Alabama. In the third round, they really kind of surprised some people with Drew Aller, quarterback from Penn State, Dalen Everett, cornerback from Georgia, and Jennings Dunker, offensive lineman from Iowa. We'll start with that first round pick, Maxi Honachort. Bailey, sounds like Broderick Jones's injury is severe. Maybe this is their long-term answer at a position where the need was always kind of prevalent regardless. What do you make of the selection, and what do you think of the long-term outlook for Honachort in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I mean, this is the third time the Steelers have taken an offensive tackle in the fourth round, and the third time they've taken kind of like a riskier developmental outside tackle in the first round, and it's not going so great for them in terms of hit rate. But I mean, I guess eventually it will have to work. And Harnshore is someone that I was just lower on. He had a lot of fans in the draft community, and it seems like he was, as he's tracking to be a first rounder, people were just kind of ignoring the mistakes that he was making. But he's someone who's still extremely raw. I mean, I have no confidence in him starting week one. They do have Dylan Cook, who, I mean, I probably would have been fine with starting at left tackle, and he'll probably, start at left tackle if something's wrong with Broderick Jones long term, and Honcho will kind of maybe slide more of that OT3 range. But if they're asking this guy to be a starter, I'm just not a fan, and I didn't have a first round grade on this guy, so I'm overall not too enthused about this pick.
Yeah, I love the Honachort, and I do think it allows Fautanu to go back to his natural spot at left tackle. So I like the move there, and I think there's a lot of intrigue for what this tackle duo can be. I think Honachort just has a lot of the athletic traits and just overall build and upside that I can buy into, and I think the Steelers will benefit from. But moving forward to the day two selections, obviously Jeremy Bernard, I think just a super safe, dependable wideout that is going to plug in well in that wide receivers room and just provide another valuable option for a pass catching unit that was kind of just DK Metcalf feast or famine last year. So I like the additions of Pittman and Bernard. Round three is where things got a little crazy. I like Dunker. I really didn't like Aller or Everett. I don't buy into the upside for either guy. So it's an intriguing day three haul, and the upside is undeniable, but I'm not as sold on it. What are your thoughts on this day three or day two, on the day two selections from Pittsburgh?
Yeah, this is a good mix, I think, for them. Well, not a good mix, but it was a mix. They got Jeremy Bernard, who I expect to be the starting slot for them. You have DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman out wide, and you're going to let Bernard operate out of the slot, which is what he's best at. He's great yards after the catch. I think he's kind of the perfect, as you know, if you attack all three levels of the field with your guys, he's the perfect like underneath guy. So I really like that selection. That seemed like a bit of a telegraph pick by the Steelers, honestly. Something I should have seen coming, but just a perfect fit. I love that for them. And then Drew Aller is someone. I mean, I guess you need a QB competition, and Aller is someone who has the intriguing tools, Michael, but just the mentality isn't there with him. He's going to need a complete switch in his demeanor. He needs to be aggressive. In college, he has that arm, and he was so risk averse. Like he just wasn't giving his wide receivers chances. In the NFL, you got to be able to throw up the ball, and it's okay if you throw an interception. So if you can kind of become aggressive and make the throws and try to do the stuff that only he can do, I can see this pick working out. But if he lets kind of the timidness and the lack of accuracy control him, I mean, this might just be a wasted pick. Dalen Everett was someone who, again, somebody who's super athletic and probably should have been a better corner than he was, but just no feel right now for the cornerback position. He'll get better. Just like really bad in zone right now. So that's a bit of a question mark. And James Dunker is someone who I know you're a big fan of, Michael. He was a college tackle and probably going to move inside the guard and just so strong as a guard. And he's someone who I expect to compete with Spencer Anderson for the left guard spot.
So moving forward to day 3, they had Caden Weegan, the kick return specialist and receiver from Iowa. In round 5, they get Riley Nowakowski, tight end from Indiana. In round 6, they get Gabriel Rubio, defensive lineman out of Notre Dame. And then 7th round, they get Robert Spears Jennings, safety from Oklahoma, and Eli Heidenreich, the utility wide receiver running back from Navy. Bailey, who's a guy that stands out to you from these day 3 selections?
I mean, this is such a quirky. I don't think there's another word beside for it than quirky from the Steelers here. A lot of weird players here, and the one I'm most expected about, and I think was kind of surprising was Weegan, and he is someone who's positionless. He's listed as a wide receiver. He's not really a wide receiver. He's more of like a return specialist, but someone who's going to contribute on the special teams. And if you need like a designated touch guy, a guy on jet sweeps and like some screens, he's going to great with the ball in his hands. He's so shifty, and he has such great vision to avoid contact, and he can break a tackle or two. So I'm really excited to see his fit in the offense, but he should be such a boost to the return game, which was such a struggle for them in the last year.
The guy I want to talk about is Eli Heidenreich. Obviously had a notable moment on draft night, so there was some coverage on him, but I think it's just worth noting. Mike Renner kind of said it best, where he's like, he had 1,000 yards receiving at Navy, which like just doesn't really happen. So the fact that he was able to be that type of impact player and have, I think, over 50% of his team's receiving yards and contribute additional rushing yards, this guy was just such a beast and a baller that, I don't know, it's sort of one of those picks where I really like in round 7, where it's, he was productive in college and he was so dominant to where it's worth swinging on to see if he can carry over any of that success in the NFL. It wouldn't shock me if Heidenreich's a guy that is able to continue to find ways to contribute for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, and maybe is one of the surprise selections in this draft. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what do you make of this Steelers class?
I give him a D plus. This is like a sizzle over steak draft for the Steelers. I have no idea what they're doing. All these players are so high upside. I will say, in defense of it, you got Ihanachor, you got Everett, you got Dunker, you got Weegan, you got Heinrich, and these are guys who, maybe not the most fundamental players, but if you can find a spot for them and you can get the most out of their abilities, these are gonna be great value picks. But like, this could easily blow up on the Steelers' face, and you check them up on Pro Football Reference in 3 years, and all the names are just like no longer underlined because they're out of the league. So this is just such a risky draft for the Steelers. And I mean, I don't mind that. I think they're kind of rudderless right now. You get a new coach in Mike McCarthy, but whenever you do the regime change, I would prefer if you kind of get guys who fit your scheme more, and you're kind of doing a roster overhaul, either just drafting 2 or 3 years when you have everything kind of the building blocks more in place. But it's just too risky for me for where the Steelers are at.
Fair enough. I gave it a B plus. I like Ihanachor and Bernard. I didn't like the day 3 picks of Aller and Everett, but I understand like the method and process behind them. And I like Dunker. I like some of their day 3 selections. I checked out Rubio a little bit just because I was just unaware of who he was heading into the draft process, but I thought he was intriguing as well. So it'll be an exciting class, and I'm still excited to see, what becomes of it or what comes of it, because, like Bailey said, it could be one where everyone kind of bottoms out, but I think there's enough upside and just ability in this class that I buy into it more than Bailey does. So moving forward to the Seattle Seahawks, the reigning Super Bowl champions, came into this draft and knew that they had a lot of pressure to replace some of their roster talent. And, I, I was a little concerned about it. But, round one, they get Jadarian Price, running back from Notre Dame. Bailey, very interesting pick. A guy that we talked about as a potential round one guy, but it felt like maybe he wasn't going to be doing so after the combine. The hype kind of cooled down a little bit. Apparently not, though. Seattle made him the selection at 32, despite talking ad nauseum about how they'd love to trade down. What were your thoughts on the selection here for Seattle?
Yeah, I feel bad for the Seahawks because the Bills and the 49ers were hogging all the trade down spots, and they're kind of left as kind of at the end of round one, just having to make a pick. And then I think Price is somebody that they're always going to take, but they knew they could have traded back and gotten him too. So a slight reach, but I mean, I don't really care. Price is he's good. Like this is like he probably should have gone the second rounder. I'm not hating on the Seahawks taking him in the round one. After they let Kenneth Walker walk in free agency. Price is like the obvious fill-in for him. I'm going to be very interested in the workload they give him. Not someone who in college football had a lot of heavy workload games, zero career starts. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they deploy him. Charbonnet, their other running back, is still coming back from surgery, and he might be slow to ramp up. So Price might be the workhorse early in his career, Michael, which is going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, he's a talented back, and I didn't necessarily hate the value. I just think, yeah, I was expecting the trade down, so it's definitely unexpected. Still, I think Price can be a very good back, and I think he's a little bit underrated because he was playing second fiddle to Love, but there were so many games where Notre Dame would just plug him in, and he would immediately find ways to contribute, like such a splash play, and help kind of revitalize the offense. So he's a valuable player, and I think he's going to be very valuable to the Seattle team, especially when Charbonnet gets back and he's kind of playing off of him more so than being the lead kind of bell cow runner for that team. So moving forward to day two, Bud Clark, safety out of TCU in the second round, and then Julian Neal, cornerback out of Arkansas in round three. Two defensive backs on day two, Bailey, for a secondary that definitely needs some, added talent after some of the losses that they had to free agency. What do you make of these picks, and do you think that they can maybe be the guys that step up and revitalize this unit back to its form?
Yeah, I mean the Seahawks, finish off their free agent losses draft where they're just kind of stopgapping these guys through here. They lose Kobe Bryant, they take Bud Clark, they lose Tariq Woolen, and they grabbed Julian Neal. I think they were a bit too aggressive in this approach. I think they kind of reached on Clark and Neal. They took him probably about a round earlier than I would have expected. Like I would have maybe liked to see AJ Halsey from the Seahawks here. Bud Clark is like he's an interesting player, but like I'm not really sure what he's going to play for them. He's like kind of got even worry in that nickel spot, which is where I thought Clark would be best at. So maybe we'll see him backing up the safety spots. And Julian Neal was someone who also like probably best in that kind of press bail cornerback through the Seahawks used to run. They don't run that anymore, but he's so good on the ball, and his production was pretty solid. So I can see him kind of feeling that Tariq Woolen role on the defense. But I don't know, Michael. I'm not in love with this day two value they got, even though they addressed their needs.
Yeah, I like Clark, and I was higher on him as the cycle kind of came to a close. I think he's someone that can be valuable in that free safety role. He just needs to be a little bit more refined with his overall like play discipline. But I don't know. I do feel like it was a very need heavy draft, so I'm curious on the value and if it returns in form of how much investment they kind of spent. Moving forward though to day three, with the fifth round pick, they take Bo Stevens, offensive guard out of Iowa, and in round six they get Emmanuel Henderson, wide receiver from Kansas, and then in the seventh round they add Andre Fuller, cornerback from Toledo, Devin Eastern, defensive lineman from Minnesota, and Michael Dansby, the cornerback from Arizona. Bailey, five selections. You pick one guy. Who stands out to you?
I really like Bo Stevens, the guard from Iowa. He's someone who I had a day two grade on. I thought he was definitely starter quality. And, the Seahawks kind of changed their outlook overnight with their selection of Gray Zabel and then also Nick Evenwari in the second. This is kind of what carried their Super Bowl run. And their interior line is still like a work in progress. They started Anthony Bradford last year, and he's not a very good NFL starter. And I expect Stevens to challenge for that role right away in camp.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Andre Fuller, cornerback from Toledo, a guy that I really liked in the process and I had as one of my bigger sleepers in this class. He's someone that I think can really kind of contribute to that secondary. I think he has great size and physicality to where he can maybe be like that ideal Mike McDonald cornerback I think the discipline and anticipation is maybe something that still needs some work, but I think he's still very smart, very good closing speed on the football, and just so aggressive at the line of scrimmage that I think he can be a guy that competes for playtime and maybe is one of the biggest steals of this class, especially going to that Seattle defense where I think he has a lot of potential to really evolve his game. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what's your thoughts on Seattle's haul here?
Yeah, I gave them a D plus. I think they just reached too much throughout this draft. Bud Clark and Julian Neal were not guys I had in the top 100. I mean, maybe Clark was borderline, but this was a very needs heavy draft, and this is the problem with these needs heavy draft is when you need these guys, you tend to reach on them on the board. That's why we're critical of the Lions picks in the past, and why I was critical with the Browns picks in the past. And then why I was critical of the Raiders. When you put yourself in positions where you need guys at certain spots, like we need a defensive tackle, we need an edge rusher, we need a corner, we need a running back, you're just going to reach. It's undeniable, and you're just going to leave value on the board. It's going to bite you in the ass later. So, I mean, D plus, but it's hard to argue against the Seahawks approach in this draft. They're like, we just won the Super Bowl. We know our roster is sick, so we just need to stop at these kind of lower value positions, and we'll be okay.
Yeah, I gave it a C. I like Price, I like Clark, but I felt like they were maybe a little early. I wasn't as high on Neal. I actually think Neal should be a safety in the NFL, so I didn't love that selection as much. I like Fuller though on day 3, and I do think Stevens can be a starter on the offensive line, at least in time. So there's intrigue and there's reason to buy in, but ultimately, I don't know. I agree that it was probably pushing needs a little too much and ignoring some of the value that was still on the board. So moving forward now, I accidentally went out of order. It's the San Francisco 49ers up on the clock. They didn't have a first round pick after trading back, but they did get Dazon Stribling to start off the round 2, kind of start off the chaos. And then in the third round, they got Romello Height, edge rusher from Texas Tech, and Kalen Black, running back from Indiana. Bailey, Kyle Shanahan can't help himself from getting those third round running backs. This is like the 9th time that he's done it. Dazon Stribling fits pretty well into that offense as like that run blocking oriented, just wide receiver that fits well into that Jawan Jennings role that I assume kind of closes the door on Jennings maybe returning to San Francisco. Height, a nice kind of designated pass rusher, sort of in that like Samson Ebukam kind of role. It's an intriguing haul for them here on day 2, but what are your thoughts on the selections overall?
Yeah, the 49ers, I think, got hosed in this draft. I think the rumor was they really liked Malachi Lawrence. That's the guy they're targeting round 1, and then the Cowboys took him, and then they just kept trading down. They're like, "Oh my god!" And then I think they probably got sniped again, and like, "Oh my god, we got to trade down again." And Stribling was their top guy on the board when they picked, and they didn't get any trade downs. We're like, you know what? We'll just take him. And I mean, I like the run blocking. Like you said, he's got good build, he's got good athleticism, and the route running isn't there right now. He doesn't play great through contact. So, I mean, he's kind of the guy the 49ers like at that wide receiver role. I think NFL teams are starting to value blocking a lot more than I think people want to admit. That's why we kind of saw so many of these blocking tight ends. I forgot who tweeted it. Um, but somebody was talking about how all the tight ends went higher than expected, and then Stribling also went higher than expected, and that's because he's one of the best, you know, run blockers out of the wide receiver position. So it's something the NFL is definitely trying to value a little bit more, and I think Stribling's going to be a better IRL player than like fantasy player. He's not going to have a ton of production, which is going to make the pick look a lot worse than it is. But this was a reach for me. To say that all that, then like I would take him like round 4 or 5. But I mean, if the NFL starts valuing these guys higher, Michael, you kind of have to shift how we grade these guys in terms of their positional value or their skill sets they bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to see if he's able to kind of match the production with his overall impact because I agree he's probably maybe disappointing on the fantasy front, but then still valuable enough to where he stays on the field and is maybe a long term answer there in San Francisco. Moving forward to day 3, though, in round 4, they get Grayson Halton, Carver Willis, and Ephesians Prysock. Willis, offensive lineman from Washington, Prysock, cornerback from Washington. Halton is a defensive lineman from Oklahoma. Then in round 5, they get Jaden Duggar, linebacker from Louisiana, and Enrique Cruz, offensive tackle from Kansas. Bailey, a quick day of drafting for the 49ers. They were out of there by round 5. Didn't have any round 6 or 7 picks, and they didn't have any round 1 selection. What do you make of these 5 selections here on day 3? And anyone stand out to you from the crowd?
Yeah, I forgot about to talk about round 3 because Stripling got me, so worked up. But just real quick, like, I'll talk about Height and Halton at the same time. Both kind of, unique body types in that, 49ers room. Height is a little bit of a thinner edge rusher, and Halton's an undersized 3 tech. Excuse me, and it's not guys that they traditionally take. And when you think about their pass rushing and all the challenges they're having in the pass rushing, when you start lining up like Bosa, Height, Michael Williams, and Grayson Halton, and they have Osa Digziwa, sorry, excuse me. So, you can even, just do like, there's a lot of combinations here where they're going to be a lot better of a pass rushing team than they were in the past. And I'm pretty excited to see how it evolves their defensive line, where I think the rebuild now is kind of done and it can be a strength like it used to be in the past.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Carver Willis, a 3-year starter at Washington, but he was spent most of that time at tackle. I'm not sure if he's a long term, Trent Williams replacement at offensive tackle, but I do think he's someone that is going to kick inside and be pretty intriguing on the interior. I think he's a very good run blocker who drives defenders well out of the rushing lane. He's got nice hand accuracy, 6'6", 303 pounds, so probably could add a little bit of weight to get more power in his frame. But just the overall ability that he showed as a tackle felt like a lot of the limitations was just because he was on the outside handling the corner. He's a decent athlete, but I want to see him on the interior where he can use that athleticism and ability to pull more to his benefit. And as he gets stronger, as he continues to develop, I think he could be an answer at that right guard spot for San Francisco and maybe play opposite of Dominic Puny. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what are your thoughts on San Francisco's draft class here?
We got to get this one an F. I think everything else would just be, in bad faith or just like untrue. Just so many reaches here. Like Stribling's a guy I had around 5. Height, I probably had around 3. Kellen Black, I don't even think I watched him. So I'm not going to hate on him too much, but just the 49ers followed up probably their best offseason ever with like such a terrible draft. And like, this is such a bad draft in terms of needs. Like you said, like Carver Willis isn't going to be the long term replacement to Trent Williams. Neither is Enrique Cruz. Like he's continuing to age up. You need a better option back there, and um, no center really. I like to see center competition there. Brendel was pretty bad, so I, I don't know. I thought the 49ers were turning a corner after that offseason where they get all these guys, and I don't even think they're going to feel the pain of this draft. Honestly, I think their offseason was like that good that they're just going to burn this draft class and move on, and who cares? But Shanahan's a good enough coach also to kind of hide these hide like how bad this class is going to be just by getting such a good offense. And the defense also is going to be good too. But this is what's keeping the 49ers from being like perennial Super Bowl contenders. To just the depth isn't there. They're not developing guys to be studs like they used to be. And drafts like this are just going to be like another thing we're just going to stroll by and be like, yep, another 49ers draft where nothing seemed to work out for them.
Yeah, real quick. I think I said Willis at right guard. I meant left guard, but yeah, I think he could potentially slot in there opposite of Puny. Yeah. Also on Black, I just Shanahan's got to stop, man. Like I don't even hate Black. I thought he was like a solid sleeper in this class, but the round 3 selection where you're just not going to use the back very much, and you're just like, this guy's going to provide value as like a dependable runner who can kind of like provide some like I don't know, just energy carries, and then you just give them like what 40 carries around the year, and then you go back into the draft next year, and you're like, look at this third round prospect. What do we think of him? So it's just ridiculous. The 49ers consistently do this where they have such a good coach that a lot of their drafting flaws are kind of covered up. This draft I wasn't as negative about. I honestly like Stribling, Height, Halton, Duggar, and Willis enough to where I'm like, okay, I can understand the path and process. So the players weren't terrible for me. I didn't love the values on all the players, but I feel like the haul wasn't too bad. I'm giving them a C. I do feel like a lot of the same issues of the past that have plagued the 49ers and maybe prevented them from reaching that next step exists. But I feel like the players that they got overall are impactful enough to where I'm not like going to tank them entirely.
Yeah, I just thought it was so bad from a needs perspective. Like they needed wide receiver, sure. They took a wide receiver, but you probably need a more consistent edge and Height who's probably like a DPR. Like you need somebody who can actually play on like first and second down more reliably, and you need probably a left tackle. Trent Williams keeps getting up there in age, and I don't remember who their backup tackle is right now. Probably should have looked it up for the video, but just from a needs and value perspective, the 49ers I think just completely flubbed it.
Yeah, it's
They'll
going to
bring
be
up their
interesting to see.
Are you looking at their backup tackle? Let me see.
Yeah, it's Austin Pleasance, Vadarian Lowe, Isaac Allerson,
Oh my god, dude.
Brandon Parker, Enrique Cruz is listed now too, but probably it's Vadarian Lowe right now
Yeah,
is the backup tackle,
he's
and
not bad, but
he's like
he
fine.
needs somebody
He was
better.
like serviceable in relief of Will Campbell, but yeah, you ideally want to get your long term option. Moving forward to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and in the first round, we have them getting probably one of the biggest slides on draft day where they select Ruben Bain Jr., edge rusher from Miami. This is probably one of the more impactful, higher graded players that we have in this class. A guy that can really fix a lot of Tampa Bay's defensive issues because I feel like that need at edge rusher was so prevalent, but it was like we had fine, serviceable guys for the Bucks. So it was like something that they kind of ignored from year to year. Now they get Bain, a guy that I feel like is instant, high end impact player. He felt to them, and they did not hesitate. What do you make of the Bain selection?
I mean, I love Bane. This is like it could not have worked better for the Buccaneers, honestly. Like when you were looking at the picks, at pick 15 for them, like there's a lot of bad board runouts. Like if Bane was gone, they were in a lot of trouble. Like we're talking about, I'm able to take Mesidor here. People are mocking him like CJ Allen, but Bane such a good fit. Like that power he brings from the edge perspective is exactly what the Buccaneers like out of their edge rushers. Just I don't think there's a better like outside the top 10 like maybe besides the Ravens too, like pick and like landing spot in terms of the value. Like it's just like hand and glove there. I love this so much.
Yeah, he's a very exciting player, and I think he's going to be a dominant piece. But moving forward to day two, they continue to intrigue as they get Josiah Trotter, linebacker from Missouri, in the second round. And then in the third round, they grab Ted Hurst, wide receiver from Georgia State. Bailey, I love Hurst and Trotter. So this is right in line with what I would have done for him. Hurst is a guy that I think steps into that Mike Evans role and is able to really kind of contribute from day one for that offense, in my opinion. And then Trotter, Levante David's gone. They need kind of that instinctual linebacker. And I feel like Trotter's one of the best run defending processors in this class. A very exciting player that can dominate downhill. I'm really liking this class so far for Tampa Bay. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're drafting off your board for sure here. This is all guys that I know you had pretty high, and I like Trotter and I liked Hurst. Not as much as you did, but like Trotter, like you said, the downhill ability, the run stopping, the blitzing, another Buccaneers player. Like they're drafting their guys. They know their system at this point. They know who's going to fit in them. I'm just not sold on Trotter's coverage ability, but like he's going to be really good for them. He's going to be a great like accumulator, and he's going to be a great run defender for them. And Hurst is someone who's going to be like a wide receiver 4 for them. And he's a little bit more raw. I have him than I think you did, where I think he still has some stuff to work on. So I think he's going to work his way into the starting lineup. But like you said, if you're looking for a Mike Evans replacement in this draft, it's Ted Hurst. His downfield ability is unbelievable, and he has the size and speed. So again, another guy who's perfect for the system. The Bucks know what they like, Michael, and they're getting guys at good value for them.
This is a very good class for them. As we go to day three, they continue the action as they get Keontae Scott in the fourth round, DeMonte Capehart, the defensive lineman from Clemson, in the fifth, Billy Schroth, offensive lineman from Notre Dame, in the fifth, and Bauer Sharp in the sixth round, tight end from LSU. Bailey, a lot of guys continue to be high on my board. I don't know if they checked out the 2-minute drill draft guide or what was going on there, but very exciting haul for them on day three. Who's someone that stands out for you?
Yeah, it's definitely Keontae Scott. He's somebody like if he went round one, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's a little surprising for me. I wouldn't be like, oh my god, what? Like he's someone I thought could have snuck into the first round, and now he's outside the top 100, and the Buccaneers kind of just steal him here. I'm not sure if he has a clear role on the defense right now. I think he does his best work kind of out of the slot and the nickel and coming downhill and blitzing everything. But he was a leader on that Miami defense, and at the very worst, he's going to be an absolute special teams demon for them. And I do think eventually, as the pieces age out or hit free agency, Scott's going to see a lot more starting snaps on the base defense.
He's a very exciting player. The guy I want to talk about is Billy Schroth, the offensive lineman from Notre Dame. I think this is a guy that's going to start on day one for Tampa Bay. I think he's that good. The injuries piled up for him at Notre Dame to where there was some concerns about durability and just, we didn't get a lot of time to see him on the field, but I think he's just such an impact player, very powerful, very strong. And, I look at that Tampa Bay team, and obviously Cody Mock is a long-term answer at offensive guard, but I do have questions about Ben Bredesen. I'm not sure if he's really going to be the long-term answer at left guard. And I think Schroth can be that. And I think if you're able to land a starting caliber offensive lineman with your round 5 selection, then I think you're killing this draft. And I like the other picks as well, but that's why I'm giving it an A plus, Bailey. I think this is my favorite class in the draft, and I think it's just pick after pick is guys that I probably like. If I were the Bucks GM, this is probably like the picks I would have made with most of these selections. So I really like the class, and I think this is a very, very intriguing draft class to potentially turn around a team that kind of took a step back last season.
Yeah, I give him an A. I'm right with you there. I think I'm just a little bit lower on Trotter than you, which is why it's keeping me from that A plus range. But I mean, the Bucks nailed this draft. This is such a good draft for them. And I think there's somebody who struggled in previous drafts to kind of after the day one, their day two and day three, they struggled to get to depth and the pieces they need. But everything they needed, they got their alpha edge, they got their Levante David replacement, they got their Mike Evans replacement, they got a guard like you said who's capable of starting there. They got their depth safety piece. They got K Parton, who I think is going to contribute on the defensive line too, who's someone we didn't mention. It's just hits after hits for the Bucks. What a draft class for them.
Great job, especially when they didn't even have like an exceptional amount of picks. It was just seven, but they made the most of it. So sometimes that's all you need. Moving forward now to the Tennessee Titans, a team that kind of started the night of surprises with Carnell Tate at number 4. A lot of people weren't expecting that one. Then they followed it up with Keldrick Falk in the first round, edge rusher out of Auburn. Bailey, 2 selections that you are very excited about and you think can make a nice impact for this team. What were your thoughts on the picks?
Yeah, like you said, we not expecting the Tate selection at 4. I think a lot of people were expecting the board played out this way with Bailey 2 and Love 3. I think a lot of people were expecting that to be Arvil Reese, but Arvil Reese really isn't a scheme fit for the Titans, especially in that solid scheme. Like they would have made it work. Like he probably would have played wide 9 for them or something. But he has a lot of pass rush work to do, and if you're not really sold on that part of his game, then you're not taking him at 4. And Tate is somebody who like the Titans really need. Like Ridley and Wando Robinson are fine receivers. They're not like world beaters, but you need that alpha wide receiver one in your room. And Tate is such a good fit with Ward, especially with Ward's ability to get the ball downfield, his ability to like freestyle and extend plays. And there's so many times where he's scrambling around the pocket, he throws against somebody 20 yards on the field, and the wide receiver just misses it. And Tate is not a guy who's going to drop those passes. Like we're going to see a lot of plays where Ward's scrambling around for 5 seconds, and he's just going to chuck it down to Tate. And more than less, he's not more than less. Most of the time, Tate's going to come down with those balls, and he's a better downfield target than Van Jefferson is. So like it's all about helping out Cam Ward, and I think this pick is going to help him out the most.
Yeah, I'm excited about Tate, and I think he's going to be a very exciting piece for that wide receiver room that we kind of thought maybe Titans were going to be like content with because there was like decent talent around the field. But I think this helps elevate the unit and really kind of rounds out the receiving room to where going forward, it's now strength of the team. Also, I really like Keldrick Falk. I think he's a great fit for that Robert Saleh defense to where he can kind of fit in as that maybe run heavy defensive end, but still just, the upside and development I think is there on the table for him to become a really intriguing piece, especially at 31. I think it's great value. You didn't talk about Falk much, so I'll give you an opportunity to talk about it. But also Anthony Hill, linebacker from Texas in the second round. 2 defensive players I think are going to make a lot of impact. So I want to hear your thoughts on both those guys.
Yeah, Falk, I think Tate was the offensive pick, and Sal's like, let me get my guys. Let me get the guys who fit my scheme. And Falk is someone who we've seen this so many times out of the 49ers, like Eric Armstead, Michael Williams. He's going to fit in that heavy end role for them. He's young, he's long, he's got developmental upside. He's someone who I think I had as my edge 4. People were talking about in the top 20 in the draft. So they trade up. The Titans were very aggressive in this draft, Michael. They trade up in the first round for Falk, and they trade up in the second for Anthony Hill. So I like to see the aggression. Go and get your guys. We'll see if that aggression pays off. But Falk is just the perfect solid lineman. And then we want to Anthony Hill, who's the perfect solid linebacker. They do have Cedric Gray, but I think he's not as much as a scheme fit for the Titans as he was in previous iterations of the Titans scheme. So Hill's someone who's he's that athletic downhill guy, and I really liked him in coverage. Hill was like my linebacker 3 in this class, linebacker 2 if you consider Arvil Reese an edge rusher. So he was he wasn't right behind. There's a pretty big gap between Styles and him, but he was the next guy up for me, and I think this is someone who I wouldn't have hated to see go in the first round. I think he's that good of a player.
He's an exciting piece, and I think the development there in a solid defense will help him kind of evolve his game and become the type of player that he can be. So moving forward to day 3, Fernando Carmona and Nick Singleton were the first picks for the Titans in round 5. Then in the 6th round, they get Jackie Marshall, defensive lineman from Baylor, and Pat Coogan, the center from Indiana. And then they rounded out with their 7th round selection of Jaron Kanik, tight end from Oklahoma. Bailey, who's a guy that stands out to you from this day 3 bash that maybe could have an impact in 2026 or going forward?
I'm looking at Pat Coogan right now. I think when you look at the Titans' needs after their day or their round one and round two picks, they really needed interior offensive lineman. And there's a rumor they're trying to trade up for Kalen Rutledge in the first round. I'm not sure how much I buy that, but they definitely need those positions, and they needed guys who can compete right now for starting jobs, which is hard to find in day three because right now their starting guard is Austin Schlottman, and their starting right guard is like Cordell Vincent. So definitely some work needs to be done. And I think Coogan, out of these guys, him, Carmona, has the best shot at starting. They released Lloyd Cushenberry, so it's an open job right now. There's nobody's like the incumbent there. So Coogan's someone who he's so fundamentally sound. He doesn't really have the like athlete or the build to really be like one of those top tier centers that we saw go in day two. But you're not going to find a more like refined guy in this guard class. And you're talking about someone who you feel comfortable starting. If Pat Coogan's my starting center, I feel okay about it. Obviously, you can do better. There are better centers out there, but in terms of like startable guys, you can do a lot worse than Coogan.
Yeah, I think the guy I want to talk about is Nicholas Singleton. Just such an impactful runner, and the vision and processing are concerns. And I think the ACL injuries obviously will push him down the board a little bit. But he's just so good, man. I mean, he's like probably someone who would have ran low 4.4s at the slowest, and he's 6 foot, 220 pounds. He offers the size, power, and just big playability that you're looking for. He has the potential to be a high impact player in round five. Don't be surprised if this is like the running back sleeper of this class because he's someone that just has that upside and receiving ability and just big play threat ability that anytime he touches the football, it can be a touchdown. And I think, for a Titans team that has so many weapons now surrounding the offense, I'm really excited to see what a guy like Singleton can do playing off Tony Pollard to where there's not a lot of pressure to just like immediately get a huge workload. But it wouldn't shock me if in time he gets more feel for the game and he becomes this high end running back that just looks like an absolute home run with the fifth round pick. So, Bailey, maybe a little bias on your side as a Titans fan, but what do you grade this class as a full haul?
Yeah, I'm giving it an A minus here. I think the Titans did a good job in getting their guys, and I'm not sure about that draft approach, especially for a team who finished with the worst record in the league 2 years in a row. You need better. You need like depth. You need to turn over your roster with Salah there, but um, you kind of see the impact it left on the draft being so aggressive and getting Falk and Hill, no picks in round three, no picks in round four. And then they do address the interior offensive line and some depth pieces later in day three, but you're kind of praying that these guys work out because right now there's still a massive hole at center and right guard. And you do have the draft, but I feel like I would have liked to see some more depth pieces being made here to kind of elevate that to the A and A plus range. But I think they nailed it on day one, day two, but their depth, the depth were good too, but it's just the nature of how aggressive they were leads them with some holes in the roster that I think they would have liked addressed earlier in the draft.
Yeah, I also give it an A minus. I really like Tate and I like Falk and I think Hill and Carmona and Coogan and Singleton can all be impact players. So I really like the draft approach that they had and the players they picked. Now it's just about seeing how they execute on the field to figure out if these guys are actually going to be long term contributors for the team and help the rebuild head in the right direction under the Sala regime. So now we head to our last team. Thank you if you stuck around thus far, and we'll try to be quick about it. But Commanders had 6 picks in this draft. They started out in round one with Sonny Styles, linebacker from Ohio State. Bailey, arguably one of the top players in this class. They get him at 7. Not necessarily the greatest steal in terms of value, but still a very impactful player. Fits well in that Dan Quinn defense. What are your thoughts on Sonny Styles?
Yeah, the Commanders completely overhauled their offense this offseason and not their offense, their defense this offseason. And, Styles is the finishing touch of that. He's someone who can captain that defense and be the young piece that's kind of, the centerpiece around which everything works. I mean, I put the top 10 caveat when I was talking about Ruben Bain about the best fit for the Buccaneers because Styles of the Commanders is so good. It's such a good fit for that Dan Quinn defense, like you said. I'm so excited to see him playing captain the defense and really just the perfect marriage here.
I'm very excited about it. But moving forward to day two, Antonio Williams, the wide receiver from Clemson. It seems like the Commanders wanted to add some extra help outside of McLaurin, and they get that with Antonio Williams, a guy that I like. You were a little lower on, but overall, I think the impact and just ability that he brings to the table to play inside and out will be felt. And I think that's a dependable set of hands that Daniels can really look forward to connecting with going forward. What are your thoughts on Williams here in round three?
Yeah, but the Commanders needed a wide receiver. I would have gone a different direction, like you said. I thought Williams, he was obviously injured this year, and we saw him like run a 4.4 at his pro day or combine. If which one was which, or where he ran it. But if he's fully healthy, he's definitely like this is the range he would go into. I just feel uncomfortable projecting him there just because I didn't see him play at full health. I mean, I would have, yeah. I don't love this pick, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it working out. I think he also like freestyles his routes a little bit too much, but I mean, he's savvy. He's got a good football IQ. He knows how to get open. So, I mean, I can see this working out, but just from my personal evaluation, I'm not a fan.
So moving forward to day three, they started out in the fifth round where they got Joshua Josephs, edge rusher out of Tennessee. Then in round six, they had two picks where they got Katron Allen, running back from Penn State, and Matt Goldman, the center from Michigan State. Then in the seventh round, they surprise a little bit. They go Athan Kaliakmanis, quarterback out of Rutgers. Bailey, four picks on day three. Which one stands out to you?
Like Galvin, he is someone the Commanders obviously lost Tyler Biadasz to the Chargers in the offseason, and they need a center. And they probably bring in Golden to be the competitor to Nick Allegretti to that center spot. And I don't know if Allegretti actually has center experience. I believe he was a guard before and might be transitioning to center. So Golden is experienced. I believe he started 4 years at Michigan State. Or maybe started at some other places and transferred to Michigan State. But he's experienced, and I think just that experience can give him the upper hand in that competition. It wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if he ends up being the starter there.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Joshua Josephs, a guy who seemed to be projected to go a little bit higher. He fits well into that Dan Quinn mold of like the defensive end edge rusher types that he's going for. Dorrance Armstrong, Adafe Owe, Caleb Von Chason already there in Washington, so it's not like he's necessarily being thrust into this big time role. But I think when you're able to add to the pass rushing stable and get a healthy rotation going, it really elevates the defense. And I think adding Joseph's as your edge four with the speed and length that he brings off the edge and nice hands that he has to swipe away from blocks. I like it, and I think he's going to be an excellent edge four for that team, and hopefully bring that defense around to where they can maybe compete again here in 2026 and kind of recapture the momentum of that 2024 season. So when it comes to your draft grade, Bailey, what are your thoughts on the Commanders as they finish out the 2026 NFL draft cycle?
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a B minus here. I really like the Styles pick. Actually, no, I'm gonna give them a C. I really like the Styles pick here, but like you said, I'm not a fan of Antonio Williams, that much other wide receiver, and then I don't really like Joshua Joseph is fine in round five, but their lack of picks, I think, really kills them here. And when you don't have a lack of picks, when you do have a lack of picks, I think you have to be a little more aggressive in addressing your needs. And they don't really have like a good outside corner. Like they're going to try Mike Sanderson again, but he's small, and if he's like too small, I don't know who they're going to put out there to be kind of their starting outside guy. They have Amik Robinson, who's another guy who's probably better out of the slot, but they also address center probably a bit too late for my liking. I don't know. I might just be nitpicking because of their lack of picks here and the amount of needs they had, but I'm just not super impressed with this takeaway. I think it's an average draft, to be fair. He's like average, so I think they did a good job, but it's average job, I guess.
I gave it a B. I liked the picks that they made outside of like their seventh round pick, which I'm not going to like tank them for. I like Styles. I like Williams, Josephs. Katron Allen, I think, serves a nice role playing as the power back in that backfield. And I think Matt Goldman, like you said, can be a starting center for this team. So limited draft capital, so it makes it tough. But I think they did a decent job of getting good players with those selections. Still a lot of holes on this Commanders roster that leave me concerned as they head into this next draft. But I'm not going to fault them too much for that. That's all we have here on the 2 minute drill. Thank you for sticking around if you did through this very long draft grades pod. But overall, we hope that you guys enjoyed it. We're going to have some 2027 content rolling out here soon. Who knows? We've seen some storylines that might have some more 2 minute drill profiles coming out sooner than you think. So we'll follow along and see what happens there. But stick around because we're not going away this time. We're going to make some content through the season, and we're going to have some enjoyable content. But that's all for 2026. For now, I'm Michael Rochman. That's Bailey Kumar, and that's the 2 minute drill.